Nominated by the Denver Planning Board.
Hi, I'm George Dennis. I'm retired law enforcement, nominated by History Colorado.
I'm Nick Fusianis, an architect and developer nominated by the AIA.
Hi, I'm Erin Hummel. I'm a landscape architect, and I was nominated by the American Society of Landscape Architects. Quick pause. So sorry. We're having a little bit of audio issues. I'm just trying to look to see if I can hold that. No idea. I don't know why it does this. Test. Okay, thank you for bearing with us. So just a quick note that we have a divided audience here, some folks with us virtually and some folks with us in person. Because of audio issues, we tend to try to project that way, but we will do our best to address all of you in the live audience as well. So we have some audio tips for the virtual participants here. I won't read them all verbatim, but you can check for better sound quality. We encourage you to have Zoom on your device with these following tips about adding background noise suppression, testing your speaker and microphone, etc. For presenters or public commenters, when it's your turn to speak, please unmute yourself, clicking on the microphone icon. And you can look at these other options as well to see if you need some additional help with that. If you still have challenges, you're always welcome to switch to phone for your audio rather than through your device. Okay, now we have one meeting record that is available for our review and approval or motion. This is the meeting records from June 6th of 2023. Do I have a does anyone have any comments or clarifications they'd like to make? Would anyone like to make a motion?
Madam Chair, I move to approve the meeting record for Tuesday, June 6th.
Thank you, Gary. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, George. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, the motion carries. Next, before we go on to our agenda for today, we always have a public comment period. This is an opportunity for members of the public to provide any general comments on historic preservation. This is not related to projects that we have in our agenda for this meeting. So if you would like to make a general public comment during this time, you can raise your hand via the Zoom function, or if you're joining by phone, you can dial *9 to raise your hands. Do you have anyone wanting to make a public comment? No? Okay. Oh, there's a hand. She's part of an advocacy party. Oh, so Liz, if you, just a reminder that if you are looking to comment on a project, please wait until your project has come forward. Including designation. Thank you. Public hearings or design review. Okay, great. Today we have 3 items on our consent agenda. That's
Just
yes. Okay. So yes, we have 3 items on our consent agenda today. I will announce them by address. We have 2555 West 36th Avenue in the Potter Highlands District. 2760 Larimer Street, Sacred Heart Church. And 720 Downing Street, East 7th Avenue District. Commissioners, does anyone have any comments or questions or would like to pull something off the consent agenda?
Yeah, the Sacred Heart Church.
Yes, I'd like to talk about that as well.
Okay, so we will pull the Sacred Hearts. 2760 Larimer Street, number 2023-COA-237. We will move that to our design review agenda after our public hearing. That will be our first item on the design review agenda. So now we have 2 remaining items. Would anyone like to make a motion? And if so, please, if you would restate the project numbers for those.
I can make the motion. Madam Chair, I move to approve the 2 items on the consent agenda. Application number 2023-COA-236 and 2555 West 36th Avenue. And application number 2022-COA-454 at 720 Downing Street.
Very good. Thank you, Anne. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Erin. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstain? Very good. The motion carries. Okay. We now have a public hearing on our agenda today. This is for the designation application of 2020-41 to 43 York Street, also known as the Irving P. Andrews House, project number 2023L-005. I'm opening the public hearing. And then I'll briefly describe the process here. We have an opportunity for commission members to announce if they have any conflicts or interest. Staff will introduce the application and their recommendation. Commissioners may question staff, and then we'll hear from the applicant, who has altogether up to 10 minutes to present their application, and we may question the applicant. Then we can open it up for public comment period. This is open to anyone of the public who would like to speak on this application. You have up to 3 minutes per person. If you would like to speak regarding this public hearing, please raise your hand or dial *9. And after we hear from the public, we'll have staff clarifications if necessary, close the public hearing, and then go into deliberation for a motion and vote. Commissioners, does anyone need to announce ex parte or conflicts of interest? Very good.
Real quick, if you're here for the consent agenda, you can leave.
Thank you. Yes, if you've been approved for your consent agenda project, you may leave, or you're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting.
With the exception of Sacred Heart, please stay.
Correct. Okay, so I believe we now hear from staff. Correct. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And Brittany, can I move it forward from this computer, or do you need to do that?
Are you?
Yeah.
So I'm there, yes.
Okay,
Let
cool.
me know.
I don't see it working, but I can just say slide. That's fine. Okay, today's first item will be a public hearing for the designation application at 2241 through 2243 York Street. This is an owner-supported designation application brought forth by Sarah Shears and Liz Andrews. The property is the Irving P. Andrews house, named after the prominent lawyer and civil rights advocate, Irving P. Andrews, who lived in the home from the mid-1970s through his death in 1998. Slide. The property is located in the City Park West neighborhood on York Street across from City Park. As of next week, the property will be located in District 10, represented by Councilman Chris Hines, And it's currently in District 9, represented by Councilman Sita Baca. But due to the redistricting, it will change. The existing zone is urban 2-unit. This zoning would not be affected by the designation. The designation would not affect any zoning of the surrounding area. The proposed boundaries for the designation is for the existing zone lot. That's lots 25 and 26, accepting the rear 8 feet thereof. Block 24, McCullough's addition to Denver. Next slide. So the criteria for designating a Denver landmark are laid out in Chapter 30, Denver Revised Code. To be considered a Denver landmark, a property must meet the following criteria. It must maintain its historic integrity. It must be more than 30 years old or be of exceptional importance. It must meet at least 3 of 10 significance criteria, and the LPC must consider the property's relationship to the historic context. Slide. The application successfully illustrates that the property at 2241 to 2243 York Street meets 3 of the 10 significance criteria noted in go through each of these criteria before turning to the historic context and intent. So the Andrews residence first meets criteria B, having a direct association with a recognized person or group of persons who had influence on society. 2241 York Street is significant under criterion B as the residence and final law office of Irving Piper Andrews. Andrews was a prominent African-American attorney in Denver, considered by many contemporaries, excuse me, to be one of the most talented trial attorneys in Colorado. Andrews had achievements on both local and national stage. He served on the legal team, which brought Brown v. Board of Education before the United States Supreme Court. And he also started Colorado's first integrated law practice with Judge John Kane, who would go on to become a U.S. district judge. Irving P. Andrews was an important figure in the civil rights movement here in Denver, organizing protests with the Denver chapter of the Congress on Racial Equality, serving as the NAACP president for Colorado and Wyoming, marching in civil rights protests with Martin Luther King Jr. And you can see him standing next to Martin Luther King Jr. here on the left. Yep. He also represented members of the civil rights organizations in court. Andrews' work in civil rights was not limited to those causes that affected just himself. As he said, "I do not like being a second-class citizen and will not be one. And if I fight for the rights of others, then my own rights are assured." This philosophy guided his entire professional career. He became known as a tenacious defense lawyer who ensured his clients received their due process. Next slide. The property at 2241 York Street also meets criterion C, as it embodies the distinctive physical characteristics of the free classical Queen Anne style, and it's an excellent example of the duplex typology. This style utilized the great gable front form popular with Queen Anne homes, but reigned in the ostentatious detailing of the earlier quarters. The use of decorative shingles in the gable end is a mark of the Queen Anne style, while the window hood surrounds and decorative knee braces are more subdued than what is found on earlier Queen Anne styles. The home's construction in 1914 came at a moment when the United States was deep in a recession and the world was on the brink of the First World War. Demand for the ornate, highly detailed houses in the earlier Queen Anne style had dwindled and an era of restraint had begun. In Denver, it was common for architects and builders to utilize a number of different architectural details drawn from many different architectural styles in their designs. Historic preservationists and architectural historians consider these designs to be vernacular, commonly used and specific to their location. As one scholar notes, vernacular buildings and settings are regionally distinct, regionally representative, and regionally understood. In many ways, vernacular architecture reflects regional contemporary culture, tastes, and economic trends. The unique amalgam of type and style in 2241 York Street conveys a suggestion of wealth without that overt ostentation. The unmodified side-by-side front door openings on the east facade can express the history of the home, which was designed to look like a single unit detached dwelling, but was actually configured as a duplex with a ground floor dwelling and a flat above. As such, the home at 2241 York Street embodies the distinctive physical characteristics of the duplex. Unlike many of Denver's stately homes in City Park West, Capitol Hill, and beyond, which were originally single-family homes that were later subdivided, the house on York Street was expressly constructed as a duplex, and Sanborn Maps shows that it's always been the case. The design and layout of the building reflects Denver early's ambitions, tempered by these economic realities. The design of the building calls upon the more restrained version of the Queen Anne architectural style. However, the unique duplex design allowed families to share the home with extended families and later allowed Irving Andrews to house both his family and his law practice in the same building. Thus, the house at 2241 York Street and its location, design, and form illustrate a transitional period when people could afford to live away from the bustle of downtown, surrounded by urban green space with City Park right next door, while also reining in architectural details and creating multifamily living with the appearance of. And this is in recognition of the economic realities of the time. This tension in design and location of the structure were mirrored throughout the home's history. Slide. So finally, the Irving Andrews home also meets the criterion J for its association with social movements, institutions, and patterns of growth and change that contributed significantly to the culture of the neighborhood, community, city, state, and nation. 2241 York Street is positioned at a unique nexus in Denver's long arc of development. Its location represents the initial optimism of the city's growth and speculative expansion outside of the central business district, to patterns of change, including segregation struggles, shifting racial housing barriers, population decline, blight designation, and modern gentrification. The home at 2241 York Street and the surrounding neighborhoods bear witness to the city's history of both segregation and integration. Race restrictions in real estate transactions were common in the 1920s through the 1970s in Denver and across the United States as a way of maintaining neighborhoods' white. A web of formal bureaucratic policies, informal and yet still heavily enforced social mores, and economic systems worked in tandem to keep Denver and most US cities segregated well into the 1970s and beyond. The federally sponsored practice of redlining in the 1930s further fueled racial disparities in housing access. Based on standards created by the Homeowners Loan Corporation and the Federal Housing Authority, mortgage lenders codified neighborhoods by race and ethnicity, including City Park West, which you can see sort of outlined in red above. City Park West, including the Andrews future home, was graded a C neighborhood and deemed declining, as it was at risk, quote, due to its proximity to other predominantly African-American neighborhoods. As race-based restrictions slowly eased, but boundaries of segregation moved east from Downing Street to High Street and then York Street. York Street became the western boundary of what was known as the Struggle Hill neighborhood. The Moncur African-Americans gave the current Skyland neighborhood where Black professionals settled in the mid-20th century. However, it wasn't until 1965 when Colorado strengthened its fair housing laws in response to the civil rights movement that middle-class African-Americans met with less resistance as they moved across Colorado Boulevard and into other parts of the city. When Andrews moved into the York Street home in 1972, the area was found by a federal study to be blighted. However, this designation did not take into account the thriving community in the area. And although he was not the first African-American to move onto York Street or even into this house, Andrews purchased the property at 2241 York Street for his home and law office represents the culmination of 2 decades of advocacy for equal rights. A stately home on Struggle Hill, directly across the street, was an achievement that took many years of hard work on the part of Andrews and other civil rights advocates to bring to fruition. However, the fact that Andrews was still barred from maintaining a law office downtown well into the 1970s, and instead used the upper floor of his York Street home as his law office, represents the barriers still in place for Denver, Andrews and other Black Denverites well into the late 20th century. Next slide. So now let's think about the historic context as well. As appropriate for a property proposed for designation, the historic context is strongly interrelated to both the areas of significance and the period of significance. The property is directly related to the early development patterns of Denver. It's related to the civil rights movements of the mid-20th century and the changing demographics of the City Park West neighborhood and the city as a whole. Next slide. The period of significance for the structure is proposed as 1914 to 1998, encompassing its construction and later ownership by Irving P. Andrews. And then Chapter 30 requires that a landmark designated property maintains its integrity. The 7 qualities that define integrity in historic preservation include location, setting, design, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. The house retains a high degree of integrity, although it has seen some alterations during its existence. It retains physical integrity related to its significance as the home and law office of Irving P. Andrews. It's observable in its original form and within the former suburban streetcar location, overlooking City Park and adjacent to other residential homes in the area. The house's gable front form, projecting full width porch and materials, convey its design and material integrity. And although the windows have been replaced with vinyl, the size of each opening has been retained, maintaining the house's overall solid to void proportions and could be returned to historic wood windows in the future. As of July 5th, we have received no public comments on this designation so far. So staff finds that the application for designation at 2241 to 43 York Street successfully meets the criteria laid out in Chapter 30 of the DRFC. Property is over 30 years of age and meets 3 of 10 significance criteria. It's related to a historic context and it maintains its integrity. Therefore, staff is recommending that LBC approves the designation application and forward to City Council.
Thank you, Becca. Now we'll open it. Oh, do we have a question for staff? Or now we'll open it up for public comments.
Applicant
Oh, the
presentation.
applicant presentation, thank you.
Mhm.
Is the applicant in person or?
Both. So Liz is going to kick us off, but then the family's also here. If you'd like to come up and sit and speak once Liz is done, you're welcome to do so.
Thank you for being with us today. Before you begin, again, altogether you have 10 minutes. If you would please introduce yourself with your name and address, and then we'll move between you all.
Wonderful. All right, thank you. So I'll go first and then I'll invite my family to join. My name is Liz Andrews. I'm the daughter of Irving Piper Andrews. I see my sister is in the room and our other sister is on the West Coast, so we are all present. As you said before, the criteria that we are using for this historic designation are substantial association with a recognized person. Our father, known as Papa to us, worked for over almost 5 decades to represent the underserved in society. When he bought the property in 1972, as you said, it was considered a blighted neighborhood, in very large part due to the Black population of the area. His legacy is both historic to Denver, Colorado, as well as the nation, serving with Constance Motley and future Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall on the Brown versus Board of Education case, and both regionally and nationally on the NAACP. As Michael Kangas, fellow attorney, has said, all lawyers practicing in Colorado at the time were students, de facto students of Irving Piper Andrews. Jim Lyons called him the best of the best. He was a graduate of the University of Denver Law School in 1950 and received one of the highest marks on the Colorado bar the following year. And so we believe that after purchasing this house in 1972 and living there for the remainder of his life, 26 years, he made significant contributions to society. Secondly, the property embodies distinctive visible characteristics of architectural styles. In this case, it is both features of Queen Anne and eclectic revival style. It's a two-story gable front house form, a duplex, and while many of us began working from home in 2020, he started this trend back in 1972 with our residence on the bottom floor and the office on the top floor. It's unique among its neighbors and overlooks City Park. And finally, it is associated with social movements, institutions, and patterns of growth. Again, the civil rights movement, as well as patterns of change around housing. During his life and time at the residence, he worked to end housing discrimination, redlining, and part of the reason he purchased the home was, again, the racial bias he faced in trying to rent office space downtown. Now I would like to pass it over to my brother and sister, Alfred Harrell and Leah Andrews, who are in the room. But I'll say that growing up in this house, we knew that people would honk as they go by and just wave, because everyone knew this is where Irving Andrews practices law. So it's been known as a historic site, a significant site for many years.
Thank you.
All right. Well, committee members, thank you for your time today. I am both honored and humbled to present on behalf of my family and my father, Irving Piper Andrews. My name is Leah Andrews Willis, one of the daughters and homeowners of 2241, 2243 York Street, and I still live there today. As a proud Denver native and current educator in Denver communities, it is especially important to acknowledge the history and historical landmarks in our Denver neighborhoods. With the changing demographics of Denver and gentrification, it has become all too easy to erase and rename our history. And today, we have the opportunity to not only hold on to this history, but cherish it. Our residence currently still celebrates the legacy of our father and dedication to justice. Pictured here, committee members, I have document A. I teach history, so I came with documents today. Document A is literally just a picture of our front door that still has our law office placard for our father. The location of our father's law office where he practiced law for many years up until the time of his death. So currently he has dedicated his life and his home to social justice, and we still hang that proudly today. The physical documents that I have brought today, your committee members, showcase again the work and dedication to justice and our father, Irving Piper Andrews. I've clumped them all into documents B, 1, 2, and 3. Again, you can tell I am a historian and I teach history, run Socratic circles. We also have copies of his law degree, memorial dedications, poems, as well as newspaper articles and cases that our father led out of our current home and his law office here in Denver. These were all celebrated and acknowledged at his memorial in 1998, as well as at several Colorado Bar Association awards and recognitions. These accomplishments are a reminder of why we need to hold on to and celebrate the history here in Denver. Now, finally, I have document C, which is beautiful. It's historic, original. It is a copy of the Colorado Lawyer, July 2009. And in this volume 38, our father, Irving Piper Andrews' life and work to social justice is celebrated and was written in part by our brother, Alfred Harrell. It is a heavy load to carry our father's legacy of social justice, but it is a load that we can and will continue to carry. The possibility of our home being designated as a historic landmark is humbling, excited, and needed. Let's hold on to the important histories and landmarks of Denver. Let's continue to carry and lift the load of social justice together. Thank you for your time today. I can also pass these around if you would like.
My name is Alfred Harrell. I live at 1011 South Valencia Street, Denver, Colorado. I am Irving Andrews' oldest child. I am you can tell because of my last name, that I am a stepchild. My father, I'm a member of his very first family. My father married my mother when I was 7, and they raised me. And I think that they're proud of the accomplishments that I've achieved as a result of their efforts. I am so proud of my sisters today and what they've said about our father. He was a giant. I do have another exhibit for you that I'm going to have passed around as well. And in it, you'll find his actual voice, where he talks about what his dreams were as a law student at the University of Denver. It's fascinating to listen to someone who returned from the war, World War II, and on the GI Bill, started law school at the University of Denver, graduated from Colorado College, Phi Beta Kappa, and finished college and law school in 5 years. He was #1 on the bar exam and was first in his class. Recently, one of my mentees at the University of Denver Law School sent me a photograph of the class of 1950. Our father was not in it, but he was #1 in his class. I am just honored, every member of my family. I can't imagine that this moment is here, where this city is going to acknowledge, by designating this a historic residence, acknowledge the work of Irving P. Andrews. He was a giant in his time. Through him, the reason I think both another brother and I became lawyers was because of him and the impact that he had on our lives. Our sisters are quite accomplished, and you haven't heard from them in terms of you've experienced their eloquence, but their accomplishments are incredible. And he would be so proud to know that they have moved forward to make this presentation and this request of this commission. So I want to thank you very much on behalf of my family, and Godspeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Commissioners, do we have any questions for the applicants? I did have one question. This is out of curiosity more than anything. Where does his middle name Piper?
I can, you go ahead, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, so originally, our father's last name was Irving Piper. His last name was Piper. His birth father's name was Piper. And so he was then adopted by our grandmother's husband, Holman Andrews, and took his last name.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, yeah, another just a curiosity question. Before moving to the City Park House, where did he live?
He built a house on 26th and Madison when he was 28 years old. And I mean, that was a significant event because, as you heard from Becca a moment ago, Black folks were not moving past York Street. So it was very significant that he was one of the early individuals that moved past York Street, primarily because of the the laws as they existed. I mean, he wanted to break through established barrier against established barriers. So he built that house at 26th and Madison. And it was bought by the first Black lieutenant governor of the state of Colorado, and is still inhabited by his widow. But my father then moved out south to Hampton Heights. Again, he was challenged to buy property, and one of his Jewish partners indicated that he would purchase the property, be a straw man, and then deed the property to my parents. And my father said, well, I don't think we have to do that. I'm going to just buy it. And he did. And he bought another home in Southeast Denver as well. But when he and my mother divorced in 70, I believe, he decided that he wanted to move back into the neighborhood. He wanted to move in the area that, as we heard, Sugar Hill for Black folks. He was a man who always wanted to be in the mix, and he felt like that was really his home, to be in the center. The house on Madison was okay. He built that. The houses in Hampton Heights were okay, but he wanted to be home. And that was the reason that he purchased this particular house, because it meant so much to him, and meant, as he said to me, it means so much to our people.
Well, wonderful. Are there any public comments on this application? I think we'll start with anyone online, if they have a comment, and then if there are any in our in-person audience, invite you up once we're done. Again, if you'd like to make a comment, you can raise your hand via the Zoom function or press *9 on your phone. It looks like we have no one online. Is there anyone in the audience? Is Glenn your sister?
She is, yes.
You have 26 minutes left. So you could speak.
26 seconds.
Oh, yes. Sorry. 26 seconds. So she could speak for those 26 seconds, but she can't provide public comment in this minute period, unfortunately. So I could pull that timer back up if she wanted to speak. Okay. Then can you move her over, Taylor? Liz? Lynn? Oh, I apologize.
There's another sister, yes.
And it says 19 seconds, but it's really 26. And get it stopped right at the right time.
They should be able to. All right, Lynn, when you're ready, you can unmute yourself and introduce yourself with your address and then continue.
Great. Hi, I'm Lynn Andrews. I'm the youngest of the Andrews children. The Liz-Leah Lynn. It's very confusing. There's a lot of alliteration. I'm talking to you guys from Los Angeles right now, but I, of course, also grew up in the house. And there's not really much that I can say that hasn't already been covered. But I do want to say that we've been talking a lot about what's happened in the past and why there's so much cultural, social significance to this building. But I've been thinking about somebody raising a family in that neighborhood 50 years from now, 70 years from now, you know, going to City Park, walking the dog, hanging out, just enjoying that space and looking over and seeing that that these leaps and bounds we've made as a society weren't done in some obscure place in our imagination. They were done on the ground where we still are. And it's much closer than we think it is. And I think that idea is great because it also brings the idea that you yourself could make change closer to home. If you see that the person next door was able to do it, even if it was 100 years ago, maybe you can too.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Very glad you could join us all the way from Los Angeles.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're ready for. You would give us your name and address, please.
My name is Michael Flowers. I'm Director of Preservation Action for Historic Denver. We office at 1420 Ogden Street, and we are a citywide nonprofit dedicated to empowering people to actively experience and thoughtfully maintain our city's cultural landmarks and historic places today and into the future. The Irving Piper Andrews House was submitted by Liz Andrews to our 50 Actions for 50 Places campaign, where we asked the Denver community to nominate the next 50 places we should work on for a preservation action in celebration of our 50th anniversary. We received over 100 submissions and narrowed those down to 50. Among them was this house. A major goal of the campaign was to help share and tell Denver's unique and diverse stories, and the Andrews House tops that list. Irving P. Andrews is a name that is well known among those familiar with the study of practice and law, but it has not always been a story that has been told to a wider audience, as often stories like this aren't. So I'd like to thank Liz Andrews and her family for submitting this and helping to educate myself as well as our organization on Irving Andrews' story and his accomplishments and career as both a civil rights advocate and lawyer. Irving P. Andrews accomplished much in his life despite facing numerous challenges due to discrimination. He became an early African-American graduate of DU Law School and was very active in the civil rights movement, including serving on the legal team that won the landmark Brown v. Board of Education case. As noted, he served organizations that furthered civil rights, and he'd continue to fight for equality in Denver, offering legal services to all, regardless of their background. He strove to ensure everyone had due process and became one of Denver's most prolific trial attorneys. He's always strived for justice, and his work has had a lasting impact on Denver and the nation. This house is representative of his accomplishments and dedication to providing justice for all, and is a building we should all be proud to call a Denver landmark. Historic Denver is in full support of this designation, and we urge this commission to approve it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments? Right. Then I will go ahead and close the public hearing. And we will move into deliberation. Commissioners, what did you think about how this property meets the designation criteria, its integrity, and how it fits into its historic context?
Well, after reading the story and standing in front of the house for a good while, hope you get that new water line in. Just good. Okay.
Yesterday.
Geez, this has been a long time coming. I absolutely agree with the staff assessment and wholeheartedly support the motion.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I agree. I was, unfortunately, I was unaware of this individual and the importance, especially to the Supreme Court case. And so I'm very glad that was brought to our attention and that this property is being submitted as a potential landmark. I support the application.
Yeah, I agree. I'm also slightly embarrassed to have been unaware. I grew up in Denver and I'm Black and never had heard of Mr. Andrews. So, but I mean, I think that's exactly why we need a landmark like this. And in terms of the context as well, I mean, I think that being at City Park is such a, and right on the park is such a perfect place to have chosen to have that house, because yeah, I think it is a gathering place, and there are other, you know, things like East High and the Martin Luther King statue. It kind of complements that as a sort of almost group of landmarks.
I would just like to add, I thought it was a very well-written application, probably one of the better I've seen in a long time, and really enjoyed hearing and reading about the entire history. Part of what Larry was just talking about and hearing the comments on, I believe from the daughter Liz about people honking as they drove past, it almost made me think of this, could you reach the criterion for geographic importance of just a physical landmark of being across from the park, etc. But we don't need to add more work to this. So I fully support this. I'd like to make just a friendly comment that I know there was some conjecture about the front porch deck being when it was installed. It seems to me that the physical evidence seems to point that it's original, in that the columns, the brick piers of the porch extend up and seem to match materials. Obviously, that's still just conjecture, but I think it would just be great to have the application emphasize that either way, it was part of the, or installed during the period of significance. So yes, I support this application as well. Great. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Good. Madam Chair, I move to recommend approval and forward to City Council the landmark designation of 2241 through 43 York Street, the Irving P. Andrews House, application number 2023 L005, based on the landmark ordinance criteria B, C, and J, and citing its findings of fact for this recommendation, the application form, public testimony, and July 5th, 2023 staff report.
So Larry made the motion and Gary seconded. Great. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Great, the motion carries. Good luck here. You said City Council. All right, we are ready to move forward with the design review process. So as the slide shows the process for design review, I'll announce each item on the agenda as we are ready to consider it, giving its address and project number. We'll announce any ex parte contacts or conflicts of interest. Staff will give their presentation, after which we may question them. And then we'll have an applicant presentation with up to time limit of 10 minutes for the entire applicant team. After which, if we have any questions for the applicant, we'll ask them. And then we have a public comment period. Unlike the public hearing process, this comment period is 2 minutes limitation per person. If you would like to speak, you can raise your hand, either the phone, *9, or online through Zoom, or if you are in person, we will make sure to give you that opportunity then. And then after that, we'll have any staff clarifications if necessary, and then move into deliberation for a motion and vote. All right, our first project up, this was moved from our consent agenda to our design review so that we would have an opportunity to discuss and deliberate. This is project 2023-COA-237 at 2760 Larimer Street, also known as the Sacred Heart Church. And I think Crystal is not here today, so instead we have Bridget.
It is Bridget's.
It's mine project.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at the next agenda. Please go ahead.
Okay. So the applicants discovered plaster damage in the sanctuary ceiling and will need to perform roof replacement. The current roof does not meet the building code requirements for insulation. The only viable options are either to damage the decorative sanctuary ceiling or raise the roof of the church. Neither option is ideal, but staff feels raising the roof will be the least invasive option. The proposal to raise the roof 9 inches evenly across the building. Proposal. So the staff recommends approval to application 2023 COA 237 for the roof alteration at 2760 Larimer Street as per guidelines intent statements 2D, 2E, design guidelines 2.25 A through D and 2.27 B, presented testimony, submitted documentation and information provided in the staff report.
Thank you. Do we have the applicant with us? Or I'm sorry, do we have any questions for staff?
Yes, a question that I had, which I did a little research into, but there might be more information about how it is. It looks like according to the re-roofing guidelines, that any replacement roof has to meet 2015 IECC and that translates to other options are 30 continuous insulation above the deck. I guess what I'm wondering is staff aware of any exceptions for landmark buildings?
For the building code?
Meeting the energy code, I guess. Within a re-roofing project. It seems like it would be a common concern.
You want me to answer that?
Yes.
Yes, there are exemptions for historic buildings. They don't have to just be Denver landmark buildings. It could be National Register buildings, potentially eligible buildings. So we do those exemptions for the energy code frequently if it will impact the character of the feature of that historic building.
Thank you.
And to follow up on that, if we decided that this impacted a important feature to an extent that it's detrimental, there would be an exception. I mean, that's how the exception is implemented.
Well, it's tricky because we felt like this was the best option to provide insulation and keep the building still usable. And because of the false front, we felt that there wasn't going to be a significant impact. We did ask for additional information because there are very low profile dormers on this roof. And so we did request additional drawings from this applicant. And after we reviewed them, we felt that impact was minimal, and that's why we're supporting this application. But you are the commission and the deciding body, and we are just staff.
Any other questions for staff? All right, thank you. We'll move to the applicant if they are available for comments. Okay, if you would, again, you have up to 10 minutes to speak. If you would begin with your name and address for us for the public record.
Sorry, my apologies. I'm Father Eric Seguir, pastor at Sacred Heart Catholic Church in Denver.
Great, thank you. And if you would give your address, please.
Sorry, 2760 Larimer Street.
The time is yours, please.
Jim Paul is just stepped away for a medical appointment. So I don't have any specifics to add in terms of the architectural design. He's our architect that created the drawings and presented the proposal. So I don't know if there's any questions you have for me beyond the architectural aspect of the presentation and what Jim has put together. But unfortunately, he's at a medical appointment at the moment and just stepped away.
Okay. Do we have any questions for the applicants? And
Hi, I guess my question is the event that seemed to have triggered all of this was plaster falling on the interior of the church. Is that correct?
Correct.
And the plaster that was falling, And I apologize because I'm not familiar with the church. Was it in an area? Is all of the ceiling in the church decorative on the interior?
On the interior, there was a not original white. I don't know if it's a soundproofing material or something that was glued to the plaster above it. And so a small section of that white squared off insulating material fell with the plaster attached to it onto the pews, literally about 25 minutes before people were seated there for an evening event. And when it fell, we sectioned off that area so no one would sit there, and then started looking at the ceiling, especially around the dormers, and realized that those square white panels were saturated with water and bulbous, expanding and pulling away from the ceiling, particularly around the dormers. And so some of my employees, we were able to put up scaffolding and remove anything that felt loose to avoid anything else falling onto people, because it's right above the pews where they sit for mass and for different events that we have in the church. And that's where we're at right now. So there's a big section by one dormer in particular where that white material has been removed and the plaster is exposed. And you can see the water stain soaking in through the plaster, coming in from the ceiling, the roof rather, through ice damming over time. So it penetrated the roof and is causing damage to the interior ceiling.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. I guess what I was kind of wondering is, and maybe you know this or not, but is in the discussion with the architect, was it the church's understanding that the insulation would be required to be provided, and that's why you were pursuing this, or was it your desire to increase the insulation sort of electively?
The former. It was Jim Paul's understanding that that was a requirement to beat the new code. But if there's an exception to the code for our building, that would be something we would reconsider. We currently have a grant with NEEP, Colorado Energy Outreach, to address other aspects of insulation and energy efficiency to improve on a very old building that very poorly retains heat and cold with the air conditioning. But the whole process that we proposed to you, I believe, was because Jim Paul had the understanding, our architect, that it was a requirement going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions? All right, thank you. We'll
Nope.
open it up for if there's any public comment on this project. Doesn't appear to be so. So do we have any further questions or staff clarification? We'll move into deliberation.
This is a picture of the interior.
That's very helpful.
For
Yes.
reference, so even if the materials aren't original, we felt the form and massing was pretty character defining feature. Even though we don't typically have purview over the interior, we did look at this when considering this application.
The damage to the dormer I'm referencing is the dormer on the right of the picture. You see that bit of light in the ceiling that's being circled right now. All the white squared off, I don't know what they're called. Oh, there's Jim. He's connecting with us now. That's our architect. That's where that was removed. And the other dormer has a lot of water saturation around it as well from ice damming.
9 minutes.
Yeah.
You.
Yeah. Is it Jim? If now that you've been able to join us, we're glad to have you here. We still have about 9 minutes remaining on the applicant time. So if you would like to give us your name and address, we would love to hear from you about this project. Are you able to? We can see you, and it looks like you're not muted. Perhaps you can try speaking.
I apologize. He's trying to use his cell phone to do this,
Ah.
and he is not a millennial or Gen Z. If you want, I can relay. I can try to call him and relay questions back and forth.
All right, well, it looks like he hopped off for a second. We'll give him another minute, maybe to hop on or connect with you.
You could enter for discussion, and I guess if he comes back, Nate. He's back. Okay.
We can't hear you yet, Jim. Can you hear us? Maybe just wave your hand if you can hear us.
Guess not.
Yeah, you may have bad signal.
As we wait, can I ask, so the insulation added to the roof will not be a requirement going forward? Or might?
I'm not sure we can answer that question here for you, but if we think it's something that should be considered, we'll talk about that in our deliberation.
Okay.
If you pursued that option, would you have to forego the grant money related to the environmental pursuit partnership you have now?
No, the grant money would still be given for the installation and used toward that end if it was required. The biggest impediment we have is with the perpetual easement requirement that we'll have to meet with the CEO of the Archdiocese of Denver to see if we can change what has been the custom to not accept perpetual easements. But we're hopeful that we can get an affirmative agreement toward that end, given the historicity of the parish, the oldest in the Archdiocese, and its association with Julia Greeley, the servant of God.
Well, thank you for that additional information. Not sure we can continue to delay. So we might want to just ask that oh, are you with us now?
So we can, yeah, we cannot hear you, Jim. But we can see you.
I think it's best if we move on.
Yep.
We can always continue the application to a later date if the commission doesn't feel like they have sufficient information, but I think it might be helpful if they enter deliberation now.
Sorry, that didn't work out, but thank you for your attempts. All right, commissioners, what did everyone think?
I guess I'll start since, yeah, I'm
Yes.
wanting to ask for this to be pulled. I guess my big question was, is it possible for this to be done without adding so much thickness to the roof thickness? Because yes, the dormers, which I saw a very thoughtful detail as far as how to address that if necessary, but if it isn't specifically required by code to do this, then yeah, I just wanted to check in and see if the applicant was in fact aware of pathways to not have to do this if they didn't want to. And so it sounds like they are interested in that.
Yeah. Yeah, anyone else?
I would just say, thanks for pulling it. And I agree with you. My issue with the overbuild is as much technical as it is aesthetic. And the long-term consequences of pancaking a roof on top of a roof, and you can speak to this more specifically, whether you agree or disagree. but given your expertise, but my recommendation would be to avoid that and treat the problem at its root.
Yeah, but there's clearly a problem that has nothing, that's why I was asking what set this whole thing in motion. Is that there is a problem, and I don't think that we have enough information to understand whether the root of that problem. What is required to, I mean, it sounds terrible when you think about all this water getting in all the way around. We don't know what's causing that, so we don't know if the solution to that. You know, in the solution to that, the insulation is like the smaller part of the bigger problem about the roof. So thank you for pulling it, because I honestly don't think we have enough information to understand whether this is actually really the solution, either for them or for the energy code, either one.
Well, you know, I think clearly there's some urgency to
Yes.
this, and you're right, we don't have all the information we might want, but re-roofing the building and dealing with flashing issues will probably solve the issue. I think, as I understand the code, that when a building is re-roofed over a certain size, it now has to meet the energy conservation code in addition. And it's the energy conservation code that's actually requiring the insulation. And I'm reading from the 2021 code. I think the 2018 code is actually being used by Denver, but it says provisions of this code related to the construction, repair, alteration, restoration, and movement of structures and change of occupancy shall not be mandatory for historic buildings, provided that a report has been submitted to the code official and signed by a registered design professional or the architect, or a representative of the State Historic Preservation Office, or the Preservation Authority having jurisdiction, that might be us, demonstrating that compliance with this provision would threaten, degrade, or destroy the historic form, fabric, or function of the building. So I think that's where we come into play, and it seems what the issue here is, would the installation of the insulation actually degrade the building to the extent that it's a problem? And I'm not sure. I think, what's been demonstrated on the submittal seems to be relatively sensitive to the form of the building, although it does alter it somewhat. So I think that's maybe where we need to discuss whether or not we think the addition of 7 inches of insulation is problematic in terms of maintaining the historic integrity of the structure. I think the technical issues that you raised, Nick, are irrelevant as well. I don't know how the code responds to that, and how the code official might respond to that. So our jurisdiction, I think, is whether or not we think it degrades the integrity of the building to the extent that the exception would merit. There is a benefit that if they do this and they have funding to do this, there would be energy conservation, which will save money. But on the other hand, will the installation of the insulation create other problems other than the visual ones? And that's an engineering question, I think, because it has to do with vapor transmission and all that dew point stuff. Just what adding insulation to the roof changes the way the building performs.
So it sounds like we're, essentially that we would like to have more information. We recognize the urgency and the need to address this problem, but that what we have before us isn't quite enough to kind of come to an agreement of whether this is the best of all the worst options, or if there's something else that might be accomplished. I will say, from a non-architectural architect standpoint, to me, the change in the dormer pitch is subtle, but it's enough to cause me concern for, this is a highly significant building, one of the oldest churches remaining in Denver. And I would just hate to see that without kind of knowing a fuller extent of all options pursued and considered. And repercussions of the options that are being considered. So it sounds to me like we've kind of come to a consensus. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Maybe, can I just make one more friendly comment? though?
Yes.
So. Absent the insulation, we're talking about it because of the insulation, but we don't know. Absent the insulation, if that's not a requirement, what is it gonna take to fix this roof so that it's not deeply leaking unless somebody here understands that or knows it? And I sort of would, well, I think it would probably benefit the applicant to be able to say that, because if in order to fix the real problem, which is the plaster's coming down because it's so leaking, the roofs, there is still some thickness needs to happen to the roof, then what we're talking about is maybe a slightly different question. You know what I'm saying? It's not just the, yeah. So I think it would be helpful to know, absent the insulation, what's it gonna take to fix the problem that started this whole thing?
And I'd like to add to that, I think too, that I don't know how much detail needs to be gone into, but we had this photo of the interior, but perhaps just a little bit more explanation of by avoiding the interior, what you're helping to preserve, or what features might be damaged if you did not take this approach from the exterior only. So
I would
I'd
like to
add
add
that.
one, oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, from the standpoint of someone sitting in the pews and looking up, I would like to be absolutely convinced that the water issue is no longer before anything is undertaken. So that seems to me, and I don't see here, if I've missed it, that the water issue has been identified and mitigated before.
Yeah, and my comment was just gonna be to add on to that, as a friendly suggestion. There is some urgency to this. And so I would just suggest to the applicant that if they haven't already, they should put a topical solution in place at the peaks and valleys or wherever they're having this infiltration problem, so as to mitigate it, so they can move on with services and activities as normal.
Great, thank you. I think those will be helpful comments. So I'll entertain a motion. I would like to point out that obviously the staff suggested motion would not be the one we want to use, but it seems to me in reviewing the design guidelines that those mentioned in the staff motion are still applicable here as to the basis of our concerns. So if anyone would like to take a go at it.
I guess, quick question, are we in consensus about the continuance, in which case we don't have the applicant confirming a date that they could consider?
If it's a continuance, I thought we weren't
have to
taking
be a
more
date certain.
information. Is that, am I remembering that incorrectly?
So if it's a continuance, it's because you don't feel that you have sufficient information to review the application. Staff does make the determination that the property is exempt from the energy code. So like, that's not something that would necessarily come back to you. If you guys, denied this, you probably wouldn't see it again. If we make that determination. Again, I've heard kind of some conflicting things that maybe you want more information, maybe you're not comfortable with this, so I think I'm not sure where you're landing on the motion, I guess.
Well, it sounds to me, and since I've been kind of pushing us forward, that I thought we were saying that we needed more information in order to either feel comfortable with the solution as being presented, that this truly is the best way to address the situation, and or that more information is needed that might shed some light on whether a different solution is possible. I don't know if I said that very clearly, but
If I could throw this out there.
Yes.
I think that if we do a denial, then they can just go back to the table and strategize whether they want to do this installation or not, because it seems to me like they just were under the impression that they had to do, and this was just a solution to meet a requirement that if they don't need to meet, that they might just do a straightforward re-roofing. And so if we do a denial, and then that could be administratively approved, I think that's the most straightforward path for everybody. If that sounds good to other commissioners.
It sounds like an answer. Well,
Well, I'm not opposed to adding some insulation. You know, I think what troubles us is the 7 inches of installation affects all of the details where the roof meets something else. And, you know, if the owner decided, well, we have to re-roof, so we're gonna re-roof, but we're only gonna add something less than 7 inches, you know, 2 inches, 3 inches, whatever. Depending on what's proposed, as far as I'm concerned, a small amount of insulation added would be acceptable. I don't know where that stands, but I think the details that are affected can probably tolerate 2 or 3 inches of additional thickness, but not necessarily 7 inches of additional thickness. So I don't know if a denial gets
I think
the owner that option.
More alternatives,
Yeah.
yes.
You know, the only thing that bothers me is the urgency of the situation. I mean, we've had more rain in the first 6 months than we have in a year. And this problem is a problem for them.
So Jen is recommending you guys continue this application. And I tend to agree, because if 9 inches is the solution and you guys deny it, they cannot come back to you with that proposal.
They can't come back with
Yeah.
9 inches, but they could come back with something less.
If
it's
9
denied,
inches is the only solution and you guys deny it, then
they can't reapply with the same
Reapply.
exact scope that they.
Okay.
8, 7, 8's fine.
So if we're going to continue it, we need a date certain. Are there, I don't know if do you have suggestions, Brittany, or anyone else as to?
So I would suggest we get the applicant team back on to see when they can submit additional information regarding this project scope.
So Father Ziegler, hopefully you followed our conversation there, and we are considering continuing this application so that you have an opportunity to submit more information to us. That staff can work with you to kind of go over what that is based on our deliberation. But in order to do so, we need to have a date, an actual date set for that next meeting for considering this application. Brittany, could you go over the timeline?
So the most likely meeting would be August 1st, which is in 3 weeks from now. We would need application materials though by the end of this week, and I don't know if that is feasible for your team. The next available meeting would be August 15th. And we would need those application materials within a week. So it's a fairly tight time frame.
Yeah, so 2 things. One, the only reason why we even proposed the installation to get permission from you all is the presumption that it was required to meet code. But if there's an exception for historical buildings, because it could change the appearance, it would save us a lot of money and help with the grant to use it for more preservation. Sorry, if we just put a new roof on, because we've had the roofers look at it and the problem is the roof. If we put on a new roof, the leaks will end. The insulation is not necessary. In terms of submitting this information as requested, I know that Jim Paul is going to be away for 3 weeks. I don't know exactly when, so I can't speak to the time frame. He was calling me just now on the phone. I don't know if that would be appropriate for me to answer or call him back and ask him this question for you all now.
Why don't you go ahead at least to ask his availability?
Okay.
So,
Or,
you guys can always continue it and just continue it to a later date again.
Okay.
There may be a solution that, it doesn't require commission review and we wouldn't bring it back.
so we could continue it, have your date set, but then if you're able to, have a new application that could only be reviewed by staff. Say without the insulation, without these cosmetic changes, that could be approved, then you could do that and avoid, the following continued meeting.
Right, and Jim Paul would be the one to draw all that up, and I can't speak to his availability, unfortunately. I just tried to call him now and it went to voicemail.
Can you
So,
just-
so the August 15th date would require him to submit everything within a week?
Yeah, that's what I just said.
Yeah. So,
Go ahead.
what we're, hearing from staff as a suggestion is to continue it to September 5th. And again, you are then open to, come forward with a different, proposal that might be able to be reviewed by staff.
That'd be great.
So not come to us again.
That would be
So-
great. And there's no urgency on our end because we did have a roofing company go up and plug up all the holes they could find. And with all the
Okay.
rain we had in June, there was no evidence of leakage from all the rain in June. So temporarily it's holding up.
That's great to hear.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so would someone like to make a motion for continuance to September 5th?
All right, I'll move to continue application number 2023-COA-237 for the roof alteration at 2760 Larimer Street to the September 5th meeting, 2023 as per guideline intent statements, 2.D, 2.E, sign guidelines, 2.25A through D, and 2.27B, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report.
Thank you, Larry. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Gary. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Abstentions. All right, the motion carries. Thank you for your time. Okay. We are ready to move on to the next design review project. This is number 2023-COA-240 for 2821 Welton Street in the Five Points District. Crystal.
Let's see how to turn on my video.
Oh, you know what? It's because I gave you control already.
Oh,
That's what's things up.
I was like, I don't see a place to do it.
Sorry, just a
Okay,
moment.
okay. Okay. And then control again. Mhm. Okay, so this is for the property located at 2821 Welton Street. The applicant is proposing to construct a new infill 6-story building in the Five Points Historic Cultural District. The proposed infill structure will be mostly residential with commercial tenants on the ground floor. On the left here, you can see some existing photos of the vacant lot and the surroundings, and on the right, you can see the proposed site plan for the new structure. The structure is set back about 5 feet for right-of-way dedication. As you can see here, we'll have a central entry that will serve both residents and commercial tenants at the ground floor.
I'm like, it's just slow. Okay, so here's the streetscape drawing of the proposed structure in context to the block. There is only one contributing structure located on this block at 2801 Welton Street, which stands at approximately 30 feet in height. Additionally, the new building is also located next to two residential structures on the left and some existing one-story commercial structures on the right. The building massing has been articulated to have a 3-story building base with 3 stories set back about 10 feet, 2 inches along Welton Street at the top. The 3-story building base relates well in terms of massing to the buildings on the block and other structures found in the surrounding historic context. So here's the compatibility demonstration. The new infill structure will include typical features and rhythms found on historic structures within the district, like a base, middle, and top on the infill structure. The new structure also utilizes horizontal and vertical elements, such as vertical pilasters and tall, narrow window openings with lintels and sills, as well as a central entry with a storefront system with transom windows above at the ground floor. So here's the proposed front facade along Welton Street. The building massing has been articulated to have that 3-story building base with the 3 stories above, and that, again, 10-foot, 2-inch inset along Welton Street from the front. Additionally, staff noticed the building is slightly elevated above the street level. The ground floor mixed-use tenants will not have direct access from the structure to the street, but through a central entry at the center of the structure, where the main entrance and ADA access ramp will be located for the entire structure. The applicant stated that there was a requirement for the first level finished floor to be elevated about 12 inches above the 100-year grid per right-of-way requirements. Staff did have concerns about the atypical storefront. However, the applicant will still have an operable storefront that opens to the street for the commercial tenants that will be protected by a railing in front of it. The proposed structure will be a total of 89 feet, 9 inches in height to the top of the building. Above the 6th floor are elevators, stairs, and trash chute overruns for rooftop access and use. Above these, the applicant is also proposing a standing solar panel cover above the overruns and rooftop area. The standing solar cover at the top of the building here will be set back from the front facade approximately 28 feet from that 3-floor base. Here you can also see that the secondary side elevation upper floors are also inset by 5 feet to reduce visual impacts on the pedestrian realm. The building will be approximately 175 feet along Welton Street, and the massing along the street has been broken down into vertical bays of plus or minus 20 to 25 feet each typically. So here is a side elevation facing towards 29th Street. You can see those upper floors set back. You can see that upper floor set back of the 10 feet, 2 inches along Welton on the right side of the screen, as well as the protected district setbacks along the alley elevation, which create a stepped back elevation at the rear. Next slide. So here's the other side elevation. You can additionally see that the windows and balconies continue at these side elevations, adding to their articulation and avoiding large blank walls. And then here's that rear alley elevation. Due to the building's proximity to the protected district behind it, as defined by the Denver zoning code, there are several step backs at the building's rear facade along the alley. And then this facade just has a simple, more modern design at this elevation. And then here's some isometric views for the proposal. The proposed massing has been broken into subordinate modules through its vertical bays of articulation with scaling elements. The scaling elements at the bottom 3 floors utilize horizontal articulation that aligns with the one contributing building on the block and other commercial buildings on this block and within the 5 Points Historic Cultural District. The building design does not have excessive building modulation and does appear that the massing will be broken down with the use of material cladding in the future as well, and that will be reviewed in phase 2. Therefore, staff supports the current design, believes it meets all the design guidelines and fits with the context of the district, and therefore staff is recommending approval.
Thank you, Crystal. Do we have any questions for staff? Okay, then we will invite the applicants to comment. We know. Oh, great. Welcome. So, again, you have up to 10 minutes, and if you would begin with your name and address for us.
Thank you. My name is Lee Payne. I'm the Director of Architecture at DTJ Design, Boulder, Colorado. Our address is 3101 Iris Avenue, Suite 130.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. I definitely will not need 10 minutes. Crystal's presentation encompassed our project pretty well. It's a great description. I thought it would be worthwhile to kind of share with everyone where we are in our process and kind of a little foreshadowing of what's next for phase 2, and also ask for any guidance on material selection to help us with phase 2. We've had a very, very iterative process with staff and with the city and with the neighborhood. I think it's been quite great. The design you see before you today is probably our 4th or 5th iteration already. So we started with an initial concept submittal to the city. I'm sure you guys are very familiar with this process. We've had several meetings with the neighbors in the neighborhood. Most recently, we met and edited the design based on some specific characteristics of the first 3 stories of the building to bring it much more in context with the adjacent neighborhood. And as I mentioned, all these we think have been great improvements to the project. As I mentioned, Crystal and staff with the city have been really great in sort of guiding us in specific things to kind of look for. I wouldn't say designing the building for us, but very much giving us great input. So it's definitely not been done in a vacuum. One of the concerns with the neighborhood is some concerns with vagrancy, particularly the building entrances. As Crystal mentioned, there's been some concern with staff of not individual retail storefront entrances. That's just not a luxury we can have for this project due to the height of the floodplain, and still preserve ADA accessibility into those tenant spaces. So we we're going for a little bit more of a monumental entrance, something you might find as a hospitality influence, but we still want those retail storefronts to have a great presence to the street. To get ADA accessibility to them, the design you see before you has a recess to accommodate a handicap ramp. We're investigating making that internal to the building, much like some other projects, in particular the Hooper in the neighborhood. We have to work with the city of Denver and wastewater to find out if that's going to be allowed based on doors being in that floodplain. So hopefully that'll be an evolution to reduce vagrancy issues. That also happens on effectively the planned south part of the project, or the plan left, where we have kind of a back door for the project. So that's something we're currently studying. And to wrap up, it feels like this project is somewhat in an emerging neighborhood in terms of the larger scale architectural content. There's definitely precedents to draw on, but it's much more of a neighborhood scale on a lot of the contributing buildings. It would be interesting to hear if there's any input today that could help guide our journey into phase 2. So we're not exploring too many things that are not contextual, things are not appropriate, brick colors, textures, details, the general exterior spirit of the project. We're feeling very much called to the historical context of the neighborhood, not so much some of the other larger buildings in the neighborhood in terms of brick colors and some of the detailing. If that kind of runs afoul of maybe the way that the project wants to ultimately be presented to you guys at the next phase, we'd love to hear that too. Thank you. Any questions for me?
Just so we're clear, the decision. The main floor is established because of the existence of a floodplain.
Yes, sir. Correct.
And to have ADA accessible entrance to each of the retail spaces you can't do it from the street, so you're choosing to do it from the interior. Is that correct?
More or less, yes.
But you're also trying to address some security issues with that same strategy?
That will be the next step, to incorporate the ramp within the building
Okay,
instead of it being external as you're seeing today.
so if it's external, it's potentially a security issue.
Yes.
Okay.
Pushes the building back. Effectively, the ramp will, would end up needing to be well over 20 feet to even be the minimum length for ADA accessibility. And incorporating that on an individual basis for the resident entrances and 2 retail tenants is chewing up so much of the street facade. We want to bring the building as close as possible to the street. We want to bring the people within the building as close as possible to the street, and interrupting that interface with a detached sidewalk is just getting too clunky.
There.
Can you describe a bit, the storefronts? It looks like there's some kind of operable elements of the storefronts that do go up to the street, but they're not actual entrance. So
Sure.
how does that?
So they're elevated. I think could you please relay what slide you're looking at there? So it's in my brain, but nobody will know what I'm talking about. Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Right. So the elements that are shown on the right, those are kind of like in the open position. If you can imagine a, 8-foot tall glass panel, floor to almost ceiling, if you will, with a transom up above. Those are telescoping glass panels that will each open into each of those spaces. So 3 bays on the right, 2 on the left, into commercial spaces. To protect people from falling into the street, we're proposing a guardrail basically integrated within the building facade. So if you can imagine any of those places that you visited in island communities or in California, where there's this interaction with bar or sort of social spaces, and those are fully open, and the thing to keep you from falling out of the building is a railing, but it's transparent, something like that. And each of it would be outboard of the glass, so on the street. We're thinking that's also a great place to have something that's a little bit more ornamental, human scale, maybe something that's organic, maybe has a historical nod to it, something with texture.
So that element isn't seen in this elevation, but it seems like you've kind of depicted it in some way on some of the isometrics or.
Ye-
So,
Yes, ma'am. We're trying to just show the scale of it. We haven't designed it yet, but that's the thinking. We think it's a great place to bring another smaller architectural element that, like something you'd see in a white picket fence or a railing on a house. It's meant to evoke that kind of spirit.
any other questions?
I maybe just a clarification. So Crystal mentioned that, I think I got this right, that there are 3 sections to the building vertically, a base, a middle, and a top. Is that correct? And not to be simplistic, the base is the first 3 floors. Is that correct? And then yes, go on.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
No, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding what the 3 where the 3 sections are vertically.
I would call the base of the building the first floor.
Okay.
It's meant to have a different character. It's meant to have a neighborhood scale. I don't want to use the word cornice, but cornice that then transitions into a different part of the building that's floors 2 and 3 that I would call the middle. I'd say it actually probably has 4 levels, though the uppermost, the 4th level won't really be perceptible from the street because it's set so far back.
Got it.
So the top level or the 3rd level would be floors 4, 5, and 6.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we can open this up to the public comments. Again, if you'd like to comment on this project, you can raise your hand. Looks like we have a few. So Keith, once you're moved over, you can begin with your name and address, and you'll have up to 2 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Keith Pryor, and in this case, I'm representing the Five Points Historic District as the chair of that district. So we did work with this applicant on this project. We do feel that it does meet the design guidelines and does encapsulate the Welton Street and the Five Points Historic Guidelines. The building is right along the street, which is appropriate for all of the other contributing structures that are drawn out into this district. The rhythms of the windows on the first floor are broken down into roughly 25-foot modules, which is reflective of the district. Given all of our rain, none of the buildings on Welton Street in their current configuration ever flooded during all of this period. So why we have to raise this building up 2 feet or whatever it is, 1 foot to prevent a flood and not have the entrances for those other units is a bit of an interesting concept, but it is zoning, it is what it is. And we do agree with how the applicant is treating the main entrance to alleviate those ADA ramps and just concentrate that into the one center piece. And they are working on how to design detail that out for the second phase. But for this first phase, we do feel it is a good solution. As the applicant said, you do have the first floor is your base. The middle 2 floors are your middle, and then the top does have a nice recess 10 feet back, which meets the guidelines. And then it does have a nice cornice to that 6th floor that reflects that of the district. So this is a really strong applicant. And we do feel that it does meet the design guidelines, and for mass and scale, we feel this is very appropriate. We also appreciate that they're not asking for any variances to the protected district, and they are respecting and stair stepping the rear of the building to the protected district and incorporating the design detail to reflect on all 4 sides. So we are asking that the commission approve this application as presented. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Keith, I know you are often commenting before us, but could you give us your address?
Sure, 2418 Champa Street. Thanks,
Thank
forgot
you.
that.
Okay, did we have another? Yes. Great, Sue, you can unmute yourself and please speak, give us your name and address to start.
This is Sue Glassmacher, 1037 29th Street, and I live in Curtis Park. I'm really here not to comment on the design so much because it looks really pretty good, just to make people aware that this abuts another historical area, historic district, which is Curtis Park. It's a residential area. It's in low density. So I just wanted you to be aware that this is a 4-sided building that will be seen, and particularly by be aware of the people in back of it. And I would think that would come more into play during the materials selection time and details. And I would hope they would think about privacy to those people that are across from the alley with those balconies and such. So it's not a criticism, but just some food for thought as they move on. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone here who would like to come? No, your name's raised. All right. Okay, so we'll move into deliberation. Anyone like to kick us off? Or a staff summary if we have one?
Okay. I have one. 100-year floodplain is a 1 in 100 chance that a major storm could flood the 5 Points Historic District. Most of the district is in a floodplain, but particularly this northern portion of the district is in a really bad 1 in 100% chance of a floodplain. And that means that it's essentially a catastrophic event. If you're on the coast, it means you have waves eligible. We're obviously not on the coast, but it's required here because this area is prone to significant damage caused by once in a 100-year or 1% chance of a flood.
Great, thank you for that, Mike, your summary.
Another
Gary.
Staff question, I think I heard it said, but I don't know that I retained it. There is a single protected building on this block. And that's the one on the corner. It's the commercial building on the corner of 28th and Walton.
Yeah.
Okay.
One want to start? This project meets the design guidelines, or
Maybe I'd like to start because I have some misgivings about a project which I think is very well intended and design. And I wonder if you could bring up the compatibility demonstration sheet. I can tell you which one it is.
just a moment.
Okay. Perfect. That's the sheet. So I am concerned with guideline 4.7, which says design infill with modern interpretation of typical character defining features of the contributing building and Main Street character of the buildings. Features to include, and I'm going to go on to B, floor to floor heights, C, floor and ceiling locations and proportions, scaling and articulation elements, parapets and cornice heights. And I think this is a very challenging neighborhood because it's changing a lot and so much of the fabric is actually not contributing. So I think it's very challenging to build in this neighborhood. But when you look at the contributing buildings, the 5 of them, or the 5 that are shown here, they have certain elements. And one is that the ground floor is actually taller than the base floor is taller than the floors above. And also there is kind of uniformity of materials. Now, I understand that this is a completely different building type than the 5 that are shown. But I think that the base of this building and the 2 floors above are completely confusing to me because the 2nd and 3rd floors are so monumental. They're almost tall enough to be one of the contributing structures when you look at them. And meanwhile, the base floor seems to be sort of squished and kind of not very, nothing about the fenestration really speaks to the fenestration of the 5 contributing structures. And we have actually seen other projects in this neighborhood where there is sort of more of an industrial street level, like the one that's on the right, you know, where you can sort of see the steel coming down and you get bigger openings, and that maybe is a good jumping off place. But for some reason, none of these elements look to me like they were actually pulled from the compatibility study or really address guideline 4.7.
And could I just clarify, the 4.7 that you're quoting, is that from the 5 points guidelines, or is it general?
Yes, it's from the 5 points.
Okay.
I believe so. Yes. I mean, the numbering is a little bit confusing to me. Maybe staff report could help me because I went down and I kept looking at the numbers and then it went 4.25 and then it went 4.7. So is that correct? The bottom ones are from the 5-point ones and the top ones are, I'm reading from the staff report. So yes, good point. Because I was confused about this as well.
But they're all 5 points.
So it's just not
standards.
Okay.
Which are required. And then guidelines, which are subjective. I think Crystal has the standards at top and guidelines.
Okay,
at the
yes.
bottom. So it does like flip around a little
Yeah.
bit. Yeah.
I guess the one thing I would say in response to that, I agree that on that block, it's definitely, I mean, it's got a big massing, it's a big building. I think that the one precedent it does really successfully tie to me is the Rossonian, and which I think does feel like, you know, it sets a precedent for like an appropriate scale for this kind of district to me, so I'm not necessarily concerned about that 3-story base. Given that there is that precedent of the Rossonian there, I think everything was kind of big first level and then smaller second level, and that was kind of the top. It would be more concerning, but yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Else have thoughts on that or anything else they'd like to raise?
I would just add that if you look not at that massing elevation that puts it in context with the entire block and lines up the cornices, if you look at some of the 3D renderings and the close-ups, to the degree that the details that are represented in those are representative of what's intended, they mimic the significant structures a lot more than that one elevation would indicate that they do. That's my opinion.
Sounds like we have a few who aren't as concerned as to what Anne raises. There any who share Anne's concern or?
Well, I understand Anne's concern. I'm just considering, if this was an infill building that was going to share its place with a lot of other existing buildings that have that existing character. That's one thing, but there's only one building on this block that's going to remain eventually. And so whatever we decide to do with this application will probably set kind of a precedent for what else happens on the block. And if the rest of the newer buildings on the block have this same kind of character of the 3-story kind of base, although the base itself is going to be subdivided with storefronts and something else, and then an upper stories that are set back, it's going to make that poor little building in the corner kind of an orphan. But I don't know that that building can drive the design of the rest of the block. So I hear what you're saying, Anne, and it seems to me that the lower 3 stories before there's a setback is probably being dictated by zoning and the standards, as opposed to having 2 stories and a setback, which would be more in line with what I think you're thinking.
I think it could be 3 stories, but I think to have those double height windows on the 2nd story, they make that 2nd story look so heavy, and it makes the lower floor look very short. I think, the Rossonians, those are all punched windows. And so I just think that it should sort of be reversed. If the 1st floor was taller and the 2nd floor, the 2nd and 3rd floor were less prominent, I just think those double height windows are so monumental.
Could that be some articulation changes then in the design details where then that doesn't look so much like one mass, that it just differentiates the 2 floors?
Exactly.
Somewhat like the Rossonian does.
Exactly.
Like
Yes.
where the dark portion of, I guess that was brickwork. I don't know, but how that's articulated at design details might bring that overall mass down.
It might, but I think that we have been kind of, I don't want to say burned before, by accepting in phase 1 window openings. And what worries me about this, thank you for when you look at the top and the bottom, it just looks like the bottom is the insignificant piece and the top is the really great piece. And I worry, and I think it could be addressed in details, but I worry that by approving it now, we have these openings and then they somehow tend to come back to us and we can't do anything much with them because we could only articulate, we can talk about the articulation of the detailing around, it. But yes, this exactly points out actually my reservation. Which is not to say that the floor fire heights or anything else has to change, but the articulation of that heavy top piece and the sort of insignificant bottom piece is the thing that works. And you're right, this is what I said at the beginning, this is a neighborhood in which all of the new construction is really what is gonna set the fabric. So once this goes, I agree, probably all of the other buildings on this block are gonna be like this, but it's a very, to me, going back to 4.7, I don't think it seems like a good interpretation of the contributing buildings that are there, which all are gonna get lost because they're gonna get lost no matter what. It just doesn't seem respectable to me when you look exactly at that piece.
So if those window openings were punched openings and a spandrel was flush with the surround, your concern kind of goes away, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
That's exactly right. I mean, and maybe it's just a rendering issue. It also worries me when somebody says, you know, it's the 3D images that are really selling it more because again, you know, from a technical point of view, those aren't actually part of the application. The application, you know, is, but that's sort of a difference.
We will require more detailed sections.
Yep.
Of that portion of phase 2.
Is it something that could, since we are at phase 1, that it could be something that we make a condition for them to address further phase 2?
Sure. Yes. This is, I mean, I understand what the situation is in this particular district, and I'm not trying to say, you know, redesign the building, but I just, yeah, exactly.
Since there haven't been any other concerns brought up, and I'm totally open to hearing them still, but and this seems to be kind of a segue into Anne's, you know, the applicant had asked for maybe some additional thoughts on materials as they move into phase 2. That does anyone have any thoughts that they would like to impart to the applicant for that next phase?
Well, I think the precedent that's been set. As I think about the other buildings that are in Belton. The lower portions of the buildings stress traditional masonry. And I think that would be a good move. When I say traditional masonry, I mean brick rather than applied ceramic tile or something like that. I mean, there's some implications of detail that I think are heading in the right direction. Provided they aren't overdone and too repetitive. I think the most disturbing part about what's being presented is how those spandrels are being, the spandrel being the part between the second and third floor windows, how they're being represented in the drawings. It does, it's either misleading, or if it's not misleading, it's not consistent with what we're talking about in terms of compatibility with the rest of the neighborhood.
Do you mean the pattern of the brickwork or?
Well, I mean, the drawings read as if the window openings are two-story opening. With an upper and a lower window with a recessed or even projected panel in between. I think that's what you're objecting to in terms of concern.
Yeah.
And I would tend to share that the spandrel section between the second and third floor windows either is part of the side of the building, meaning flush with the rest of the masonry, or if it is detailed in some way, it emphasizes the windows separately rather than trying to gang them together.
It seems like that could be part of the language of a condition that as far as, we studying the spandrel.
We just say we study, or do we have to be more?
Well, what I'm hearing is it has more of a vertical expression
Yeah.
currently, and you would like to see more of a horizontal expression, so,
Not necessarily more of a horse, but less emphasis on it.
well, perhaps worded in those ways.
Because all of the contributing buildings basically are very wall buildings. And we know that this is not a bearing wall building, but there's those, there's no nod to the fact that all of the, the contributing structures are bearing wall buildings. This is just a flat out, curtain wall, basically, and that's, and the vertical openings are that spandrel in it is part of what's contributing to that. If it was more of a punch opening look, then it would be more capable with. The
I guess I would be really curious to hear what other commissioners think, because personally, I'm not really bothered by the spandrel, and I guess I'm also looking at this thing as a whole composition, and I think understanding why the designers have chosen to do that in order to kind of create, because I could see, having a million punched openings on the second and third floors just could feel a bit chaotic, and so by kind of adjoining them, it a bit simplifies the overall composition, and it also contrasts a bit with the upper three levels that do have a kind of more like horizontal joining of window pairs of pairs, and then these balcony pairs. Like I feel like we're almost getting a little bit overly prescriptive to say, hey, here's how you have to subdivide the windows, this levels. I don't know. How do other people feel?
I mean, I do understand where Anne is coming from. I guess I could see at risk of, sounding like I'm trying to design something, but I could see the spandrel somehow remaining close to what they're being now, but blending in more with the surrounding wall so that they don't stand out as much from the remainder of the wall. As a solution that continues to keep the composition that they have, but doesn't draw the eye to that piece of window being connected between floors. It's just a thought, but
I mean, I agree with Larry that I think it's getting to be too prescriptive. And so you could just take everything that I said as a friendly comment, because I agree, but that is my friendly comment. How about that?
okay.
Just we could leave it there and call it a friendly comment.
I mean, I'll just follow up with that I feel that this application meets the design guidelines as presented. And having been here for 5 years and seeing projects in 5 Points are really challenging to meet their standards and guidelines. I think this applicant did a really good job of listening to the neighborhood and working with staff and following the guidelines in this really challenging situation. I would like to address how well I feel they articulated the back of the building for the adjacent historic district, which we haven't always seen so much attention placed on that. That's kind of like a backside. So I support this as presented. I appreciate everybody's input as leading into the next phase of design details, because I feel that spandrel portion can be articulated and figured out in design details without us prescribing what they do. So just, I know this is a challenging historic district to work in, and appreciate all the input. I mean,
Thank you, Erin. Anyone else? Or would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make the motion. Madam Chair, I move to approve application number 2023-COA-240 for the Phase 1 mass forming context at 2821 Welton Street as per the 5 Points Historic Cultural District Design Standards and Guidelines, 4.1 through 4.5, 4.7, 4.8, 4.10, 4.11, 4.16, 4.17, 4.21, 4.23, 4.25, 4.27, character defining features for the 5 Points Historic Cultural District, presented testimony, submitted documentation and information provided in the staff report.
Thank you, Erin. Do I have a second?
Second.
Nick, thank you. All right, all those in favor, aye? Aye. Any opposed? Or abstentions? Great, the motion carries and thank you. We did staff for design details. So as Brittany kindly reminded me, normally we take a break at about 3 to be all, is that okay? So let's try to make it as quick as possible, hopefully aiming for like 5 minutes. Okay. Unfortunately. Okay, are we? For those online, can they hear us now? Okay. So thank you for your patience as we took a quick break. We are back and ready to move on to our next project, which is number 2023-COA-244 at 2818 Welton Street, also in the Five Points Cultural District. And our staff person is Brittany.
So our next project is for a 3-story infill development within the 5 Points Historic District. This is for the phase 2 design detail review. The commission has already approved the phase 1 mass form and context submittal, and the commission approved that on April 5th, 2022. So this building is proposed to be clad in brick on the front and rear elevation. It's this coffee bean color that you see on the screen here. It's a kind of reddish brown color, and then it will have precast concrete accent details dividing the floors of the building and helping to define the storefront and ground level. The ground level will have a integrated fabric awning that is triangular shaped. This proposed infill does have 2 entry doors on either side of the building and storefront in the middle. There is a operable storefront window here to allow for pass-through service for the restaurant tenant that is proposed for the ground floor. And then the 2 levels above are intended to be private residence, so it is a true mixed-use building. The commission has seen this building a few times previously. There was a prior submittal that was very similar to this that had a additional rooftop floors. The applicant has eliminated those floors, and then they also refined some of the articulation of the facade materials to look less like a structural system and more like a traditional brick construction building that you see within the 5 Points Historic District. So on the secondary elevations, the applicant is proposing to use a CMU block that is stained in the natural finish, and then the horizontal articulation with the precast concrete will continue onto these elevations. This 3-story building is adjacent to a 5-story building that has not yet broke ground, but has been approved by the commission. So the south elevation will probably not have significant amount of visibility, but the north elevation will. Due to that visibility, staff are recommending that the applicant go with more of a standard brick size CMU profile than the proposed solid soap profile that they are currently proposing. And this product does come in a more standard brick size. So we are recommending the common brick 2-inch profile as opposed to the solid soap profile that is currently proposed. The applicant has indicated that the north elevation may be used for art opportunities, which is encouraged by the 5 Points design standards and guidelines to connect with the history of the district. If it's a true art component with no signage, that will not require review by the Landmark Preservation Commission. In the rear, the property will have a horizontal wood fence around it to separate off parking for the residential uses, which will be located on the north side of the property, and then also a outdoor patio for the restaurant on the ground floor. So here are some details of the storefront and entry doors. The lighting will be this kind of tube lighting, I guess. It is not strictly down lighting, but it's also not casting light upwards, so staff do not have concerns over the proposed lighting that is proposed at the ground floor and at entries. All windows for this building will be aluminum clad wood with fixed operations. And then we do have a concrete header and sill for these windows and a natural finish, as you can see here. And then at the rear, the residential uses will have some balconies that does have a clear railing, which you can see in this detail here. This entrance here is for the residential uses. And this entrance here is for the ground floor tenant, but primarily the upstairs residential uses will be accessed in the rear, where there's an elevator and staircase located as well. So generally speaking, staff are supportive of this application. We are just recommending that the CMU block be the standard common bond brick size profile to better fit in with the surrounding context and reflect the scale of the historic materials in the district.
Great, thank you, Brittany. Do we have any questions for staff? Okay. All right, I think we're ready to hear from the applicants who must be online. Great. Once you're been promoted to panelist, you have up to 10 minutes collectively for your presentation. If you would begin with your name and address for the record, please.
I think you promoted the wrong hand. Sorry.
Oh,
Yeah.
did I moved ahead too much, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, just a moment.
That's my fault.
Thank you. Okay. We have them both now? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Yes, so please start with your name and address.
Cody Van Holland, ArcWest Architects, 1525 Riley Street here in Denver. Brittany did a really good job, and just first off, thank you to the commission for taking the time to review this and staff for all the comments and work you guys have provided to get us to this point. It has been about a 3-year process, I think, since the initial one. So I'll just piggyback quickly a little bit on what's really been said. For the CMU block, which Brittany was talking about, we really were looking to get some art on this, and we just thought the bigger CMU block would provide easier kind of transfer of this. But with that being said, we are more than willing to kind of change this up to the smaller brick clad, especially because we don't know how long this north side is going to be open. And so the only other kind of thing I want to touch on is we talked about the aluminum windows for the second and third floor. The first window is actually going to be a little bit more of a curtain wall system to try to get some delineation between kind of that base and middle that kind of gets discussed in this area. So yeah, thank you. If you have any questions, I also think the owner of his online bill might say some things as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Is Bill speaking or no?
Hi, this is Bill Schwartz. I live at 2927 Champa Street here in the Five Points area. And yes, I'm here for questions, but thank you, Brittany and Cody. That is where we stand. I think that our request is pretty minimal today, so hopefully we can answer any questions you might have about it.
Great, thank you. With that, commissioners, do we have any questions?
I have a question about the sidewalls and what is the construction is it an anchored veneer or an adhered veneer? And what is the backup? It's not a guideline question, it's a curiosity question.
Yeah, it will also be an anchored veneer. It gets applied pretty much the exact same way as regular brick, but it's just a little bit thinner profile.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Great, thank you. Public comments, is there anyone in the audience who would like to make a public comment? Okay, Keith, you may begin. We have your name and address already, but you have up to 2 minutes for this project.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. We can hear you, Keith.
Can you hear me now?
We can still hear you. Can you hear
Oh,
us?
okay, great.
Yeah.
Yes, Keith Pryor, 2418 Champa Street, Chair of the 5 Points Cultural District Design Review Committee. And yes, this applicant has been working quite a while and has come through with a lot of different iterations, and this one is really working a lot better with the district. The design detail looks great. I did have a question about the window as far as the server goes, but there is Jay's Pizzeria that has a similar window down the street at 27th and Welton Street, has a small little window. So there are other examples of that that are found within the district. But I do agree with staff and Brittany on the smaller CMU block to make it look more like bricks, because this will be a while before those sides get done. But we do appreciate the brick on the front facade, the use of higher materials on the sides, as well as on the rear of the facade with the additional brick. So we do support this design detail and ask the commission do as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? No. Okay, staff, any summary you'd like to give?
Yeah, elsewhere, we probably wouldn't allow a pass-through window of this operation. But this is in the 5 Points district where activation of the street is kind of more important than some minor architectural details, because this district isn't designated for its architecture. So there are a few windows of this style within this neighborhood to activate that kind of streetscape and things of that nature. So.
Okay, thank you. Great, commissioners, would anyone like to kick us off in our deliberation? Gary?
Well, I think it meets the guidelines. I think the expression on my face had to do with something I was thinking about constructability. And I don't think we have any legal exposure for passing a project that meets the design guidelines that might have constructability issues. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay. I had no issue with the pass-through window. I think actually they're kind of essential in this day and age and culture to reintegrate street traffic and foot traffic and neighborly feeling. I know during COVID, a number of restaurants near where we live, bashed through handout windows, and it's what kept them alive and kept the street still kind of vibrant. So I think it's a nice plan, long time coming, and I would approve the presentation.
Thank you, George. Anyone else? If not, would someone like to make a motion? Oh, sorry, Anne?
I just want to make one friendly comment. I might be following up on what Gary is saying. Is that there is part of me that is a little bit worried about the false sense of history in having a party wall that is concrete block that's actually not really concrete block, but it's really You know, an adhered product, and there's something sort of unusual.
I understood it to be a anchored product, which is where my concern is. If it's 2 inches, is that because a concrete block soap is not 2 inches thick, it's 1.5
But
inches
it's
thick.
CMU.
Concrete masonry unit.
I mean, and so I just wanted to kind
But
of.
that's a technical building code
Right.
concern and, eventually these walls will be covered. In the meantime, the responsibility for whatever happens to them is the owners and the architects and.
It's true, but it's sort of a little bit of an odd false sense of history, I think, because that is a historic, these party walls that are made from. Yeah,
Well, I think you're right, although, historically, party walls were often made with masonry materials that weren't even, modular brick. They might have been tile,
exactly.
and they were, so, I'm not as concerned about that.
Yeah.
But I think I support the condition that's being proposed by staff.
Which I think does have a normal brick thickness too, so.
Well, I'm not sure.
Oh, there was a dimension on it. I think it was 2.25
Yeah.
tall by
Okay.
3.5 steep. So
Oh, it's 3.5 deep?
I'm pretty
It's
sure
like,
that's what I saw.
Yeah.
nominal brick dimension.
Okay, that,
The what was originally there was a true soap that was.
yeah, that satisfies my concerns to a certain degree.
Great. Okay, would anyone like to make a motion then?
Madam Chair, I move to conditionally approve application number 2023-COA-244. For the phase 2 design details submitted for the infill project, the 2818 Welton Street per design standards and guidelines, character defining features with the 5 Points Historic Cultural District, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report with the following condition: use the 2-inch common brick dimension for the CMU block material shown in specification page for this material.
Thank you, Barry. Do you have a second? Second. Thank you, George. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Or abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you. Next, we'll move on to 2023-COA-247 at 2432 Stout Street in Curtis Park. I should note that our another application for 2724 Stout Street was removed from the agenda for today. So we are moving on to this project with Jesse as our staff.
I've given you control, Dusty, let me know if it works or not.
Fingers crossed. Okay, so this is 2432 Stout Street. It was constructed in 1886 and is a contributing building to the Curtis Park Historic District. The primary structure on the lot is a simple Italianate building with a bay window and corbelled brick cornice seen in the picture on the left. The applicant is proposing to construct a new ADU structure at the back of the lot. Yep, it's not letting me. So the ADU will be 36 feet by 19 feet and will be 24 feet in height. It will have 2 stories and will be built in the neo-eclectic style. There are several examples of eclectic style primary buildings in Curtis Park. However, most 2-story secondary structures tend to be simple gable roof carriage houses. Staff have concerns that the ADU structure is too replicative of adjacent primary structures and is not compatible with the primary structure on the lot or other historic 2-story secondary structures in the district. Staff recommends simplifying the design to better relate to the primary structure that primary structures form. And pictured here are various primary structures in the district, including the primary structure for the lot. So here are additional photos of secondary structures in this district. As you can see, most of these historic secondary structures have gable roof forms with gable dormers and often match the form of the primary structure, but are more simplified and utilitarian in appearance. The primary roof will be a flat roof with a mansard roof, dormers, and hip roof bay on the northwest elevation. The flat roof will be clad in membrane roofing. The roof material or the roof, the mansard roof dormer and a bay will be clad in a raised seam metal roof. Or excuse me, apologize. I will back up. So the flat roof will be clad in a membrane roofing. The mansard roof will be clad in a fiber cement half round shingle siding, and the dormer and bay window will be clad in a standing seam on the northwest elevation. The roofing color for the standing seam metal roof is not listed, so that information will need to be provided. The southeast alley elevation will feature hip roof canopies over the garage and over the rear balcony. The canopies appear to be clad in standing seam metal roof. Clarification will be needed from the applicant on what material will be used there. The northwest elevation will be clad in summit brick in the color medium red, which is typically found in the Curtis Park Historic District. The brick will wrap the corners slightly of the building, and the southwest and northeast, as well as the southeast elevations, will be clad in fiber cement half round shingles, similar to what will be on the mansard roof portion of the building. All projecting roof eaves will have a simple wood chamfered edge bracket with a circle detail. Sorry, stay on that one. The building will feature weather shield double hung windows. The material for those windows is not listed in the application. The windows will be inset into the wall 2 inches per their section drawings. The applicant is proposing a porthole style window on the northeast elevation. However, the applicant does not detail the material or manufacturer for this window. That information will need to be provided. Additionally, the applicant is proposing 3 types of service doors for the building. The northwest and southeast elevation will feature single panel 3/4 light Therma-Tru fiberglass doors with a transom. The southwest elevation will have a 2-panel 1/4 light Therma-Tru fiberglass door. And then the northeast elevation will feature a single panel 3/4 light Therma-Tru door, fiberglass door. The application materials do show a 3rd door type, a 2-panel half light door, but the materials, manufacturer, and location of the door are not shown clearly in the application or in the drawings. So the applicant again will be required to spec simulated. Additionally, some of the windows on that, or excuse me, the window on the half light door shows divided light. If it is going to be used on this structure, those divided light windows or the divided light door will need to be simulated divided light with a spacer bar. And then finally, the garage door will be a steel arm Hillcrest carriage style door. The applicant is proposing to install a balcony on the southeast elevation over the garage door. The applicant has not included materials or manufacturer information for the proposed balcony. And then they're also proposing simple gooseneck lighting on the southwest and northeast, as well as the southeast elevations. And then they're proposing a simple orb sconce light on the northwest elevation at the entrance. Materials information and manufacturer's information have not been provided for these light fixtures and will need to be provided in the application. Staff would also like to note
issue between the rear elevation shown at the bottom of the screen and the southwest elevation. One of those lights is shown in a different placement, and that will need to be corrected on the drawings. Staff did receive, so the applicant, again, will need to provide all of those materials that we listed out as missing information before we can issue a COA. One final side note that I would say is that the renderings do show that there are 2 arch gate doors on either side of the alley's elevation. We do not have any additional information, and those appear to be new fencing materials. So the applicant will also need to provide information on those gates. So the ADU form is not compatible in staff's opinion with the form of the primary structure on the site or other secondary structures in the district. Staff recommends simplifying the ADU form so that it does not compete with the primary structures in the district and better relates to the primary structure on site and other secondary structures in the districts, citing guidelines 4.3, 4.4, 4.11, and 4.19. The ADU roof form is overly complex, especially when compared to the roof form on the primary structured. Mansard roof form, dormers, and bay make the structure read more as a primary structure rather than a secondary structure and competes with the primary structure on the site. We cite guideline 4.6. The application packet is missing some materials information that will need to be included prior to issuance of a COA. Staff is recommending denial of this application, citing the guidelines that we just mentioned. I would also note that staff did receive a letter of support from the RNO chair, Keith Pryor, on May 31st, 2023. A copy of that letter can be found in the application materials, along with other letters of support from community members.
Thank you, Jesse. Commissioners, do you have any questions for staff? Great, we'll hear from the applicants next. When you are ready to speak, please begin with your name and address, and you have up to 10 minutes.
Hello, Commission. Thanks, Jesse. Appreciate it. Thanks for working with us on this. My name is Jeff Baker. I'm at 2422 Champa Street, and I'm going to go ahead and get going here. So I'm going to dive right into our response to the form not being compatible. And actually, I'm going to start out with some quotes from Bill West's Historic Denver Guidebook, Curtis Park, Denver's oldest neighborhood. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. Bill still lives in Curtis Park at 93 years of age. He says standard architectural categories will not be especially helpful to those using this handbook as a guide to walking the sidewalks of Curtis Park. He goes on to say many of the houses in Curtis Park are best described as vernacular structures influenced by national trends as well as local tastes. Though some of them were designed by trained architects, many others were built by men with little or no formal architectural training. In another book, Richard Brechtel, in his book Historic Denver, described the homes of Curtis Park as a stylistic combination of elements that speaks to the modern architect's role as a composer of all that is the best from the past. It was obviously a time of freewheeling, eclecticism, innovation, and experimentation. While there are formal styles like Italianate, Second Empire, Queen Anne, the majority of the neighborhood's homes are eclectic vernacular, blending aspects of Queen Anne, Second Empire, Romanesque, and Gothic, forming the typical features and rhythms unique to Curtis Park. Bill goes on to say, whether the work of a trained or untrained architects, the houses of Curtis Park present today's visitors with a wondrous variety of free-ranging styles. This ADU exemplifies the spirit and consistently matches the historic rhythms of the neighborhood. We, along with the surrounding neighbors, the homeowners, Curtis Park Design Review, the previous chair of the Curtis Park Design Review, Sue Glassmacher, feel this building is a modern interpretation of the eclectic style found in the neighborhood and are asking for your approval. More importantly, especially from the front perspective, this building cannot be seen from the primary street. Being that this ADU is just over 600 square feet and located in the rear 35% of the lot, it would never be misconstrued as a primary structure. And we did submit this from the, simplify this building elements from the original submittal. Some of the pictures that you see here of other carriage houses were in response to that most secondary structures are boxy, but there are a lot of boxy and ornately detailed carriage houses existing in the district. I will go on to say this roof form on the front facade here is not a true mansard roof. The majority of the building is a simple box. If you look at it from the rear, it looks like an Italianate. If you look at it from the sides, it looks like an Italianate. The step gable actually blocks it from all views except for the homeowner from seeing any other of those design details that will be facing only the homeowners. The roof form is combining the eclectic vernacular and is following the typical rhythms and forms of the neighborhood. Again, this ADU is not visible from the street, and the view from the alley presents as a box. In regards to the windows are Weather Shield Signature Series aluminum clad. That'll go for the round window as well. And if we have any other door specs or anything that we need to address, we can address those. As well as the balcony will be a metal balcony that will probably be custom built. In regards to the ADU form not compatible with the form of the primary structure, the ADU represents a modern interpretation of the eclectic character defining features found in the Curtis Park district. Plus, again, the ADU cannot be seen from the street, and all surrounding neighbors support this design. Thankfully, in 1995, neighbors like Bill West, Rich McGinn, and Randy Vetter began landmarking the neighborhood. And today we have what Bill West calls an eclectic collection of 500 late 19th century homes to match any historic district in the country. There are many different types of original carriage houses in the district, some ornately detailed, some boxy, some with gables, often not matching the primary structure, as you can see in some of those examples, and some much larger than the primary structure actually itself is. We feel this form is a modern interpretation of the old vernacular style. It is boxy with a simple roof, and the front facade will only be visible from the homeowners. Therefore, again, we're asking for your approval. I want to point out Sue Glassmacher also mentioned that some of the secondary structures do not match the primary structure in the district. I will be available for questions, but I believe Jim, the homeowner, would like to speak next. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Jim, when you begin, if you would start with your name and address, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hi, I'm Jim Denton. I'm at 2432 Stout. Yeah, Hillary and I are the owners of Hillary, my wife, Denton, are the owners of 2432 Stout. And you might say that we're kind of Curtis Park Historic District enthusiasts. While we haven't lived there for decades, like many of our direct neighbors who support this project, we absolutely love it the same amount. With our ADU, we wanted to pull in character defining elements from our block that we admire and adore. Every simplified element in this design exists on our block and is found in the neighborhood. We think our architect has paid homage to those elements in a respectful way, and we are super excited about it. While we do have neighborhood support, and in our opinion, we are following the rules as written, we also want to point out again that you won't be able to see this ADU from the street and none of the front of the ADU from the alleyway. So we ask for your full approval of this design. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant? No. Thank you for your time. Public comments first. Are there any in the audience who would like to comment on this project? Please raise your hand. One. So we'll start with Declan Riley. If you could start with your name and address once you're able to speak, and you have up to 2 minutes. You are Declan, you are promoted to a panelist, so hopefully you can unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Yes, thank you. My name is Ashley Albright. I live at 818 32nd Street in Curtis Park. Thank you, staff and commission. I do not believe that this design meets the criteria set forth in either the Secretary of Interior standards or the specific Landmark Commission regulations, and therefore support the staff's recommendation of denial. Specifically 4.3, the ADU is not subordinate to or complementary to the main structure. 4.4a form, it's not Dutch or Italianate. 4.5, there is no simplified interpretation of a historic design at minimum, and it is not at neutral. It is not neutral at minimum. The roof, 4.7, 4.6, 4.7, the roof is not compatible with the primary structure or the mix of styles. 4.11, the mix of building styles is too busy. 4.19, the new secondary structure is to be compatible with and subordinate to the primary structure and historic context of the neighborhood. While there is such a thing as vernacular, it is the exception and not the rule. And if anybody can do anything and just call it vernacular, then pretty soon there's no need for any guidelines. The Secretary of Interior standards are the leading standards. The guidelines are in the introduction, specifically paragraphs 3 and 9. 9 pertains to new additions and new construction. Chapter 4 of your guidelines states to promote new construction that is compatible with its context. Particularly 4C is not met to ensure that new buildings can be differentiated from the surrounding historic context and recognized as current construction, or at minimum incorporate a neutral design. The intent is to give homage to the primary structure and the surrounding neighborhood by incorporating some details of that structure while being subordinate to the original structure and utilizing shapes, forms, and materials which will nod to the past, but represent.
Our time is up. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but your time is up, so we'll have to move on to the next speaker. Thank you for your comments. Keith is next. And again, Keith, you have up to 2 minutes.
Keith Pryor, Chair of the Curtis Park Neighbors Design Review Committee. And yes, we did review this. We did have one dissent, but the other majority of the Design Review Committee was very enthusiastic about this. This design, if it were a true mansard, would have a hipped roof, as other mansards within the Curtis Park Historic District do, but this roof is actually flat, which is flat because it does relate to the primary structure, which is a part of the guideline, because it is an Italianate with a flat roof. That's why they did not do a true mansard. And again, pulled in from the vernacular of the Curtis Park District. So the roof does match the primary structure. It is a flat roof structure. This would be a box had it not been for the owner's decision to slightly slant back that front facade. Everything else would look just like a box, which has been approved by this commission. There is very simplified details. They had gone with a greater detail for their original submittal, but have significantly simplified this application. Again, no hipped roof, which is traditional to a mansard roof. It is a flat roof, which is an Italianate. The front bay obviously relates to the front bay of the Italianate, which is very common to have a single story bay on Italianates throughout the district within Curtis Park. And so that also ties it into the primary structure. So most of the ADUs do not fall within the federal guidelines because they do not cover ADUs. This ADU, literally because the house attaches to the house next door, there's no way to see this visibly from the street. So they did want to have a little bit of added detail, which they've significantly simplified to tie to the house, because they will be looking at it and no one else will. But it does relate to the primary structure with the flat roof. It does relate to other
Thank you, Keith. We'll have to cut you off there due to the time being up. We have one more comment from Sue. Sue, you have up to 2 minutes. You may begin whenever you're ready. You can unmute yourself, Sue, and begin speaking.
Sorry, I had to unmute. Sue Glassmacher, 1037 29th Street. So you know that we have a lot of old carriage houses in the back. They don't match the style of the front houses. They might be complementary, but being so, that is, most of them are not landmarked and they could come down at any minute. I just want you to know our carriage houses, unless they have been divided from the house, are not landmarked. So I don't know why this one is such a big deal for what it is. It's a fun little house. We like the design and it would make a great primary design, but you know what? No one's going to see this. So who cares if it's over design? What's the big deal? So that's how I view it. And our carriage houses always, old ones, look like little houses. So this one falls into that category. It's fun to see someone building a little house rather than the bland rectangular things we see. But again, you know, our carriage houses are not landmarked and no one is ever going to see this. So why not give them a little bit of joy? That's it for me.
Thank you. Do we have any other hands raised? It looks like not. So we'll close that. And staff, do you have any summary that you'd like to provide?
Yes, so Brittany, if you could go back to the page with the three-dimensional drawings, I think it was the last one. So there is a one-story structure to the right side of the building. So that may allow some visibility of the structure. Did want to point that out. And if there are any concerns from the commission, I would recommend that they provide additional streetscape studies to show visibility. And then also I would like to make the correction that we know that this isn't a true mansard roof, but it is pitched pretty steeply on that front side of the building with mansard-like appearance. This is very atypical of secondary structures, and it does not relate to the primary structure. Again, staff is not recommending replication of the primary structure in the secondary structure. However, we are asking that the secondary structure be deferential to the primary structure and have some relationship to the primary structure, as well as the surrounding historic complex.
Thank you, Jesse. All right, we'll move into deliberation. Does anyone have some opening thoughts?
Yeah, sure. I generally agree with staff. More specifically, it has been mentioned, but more than the mansard roof or the slope facade, whatever we want to call it, is the step back on the sides, which is sort of, is that Flemish? And I didn't see anything in the application that referenced structure that shared similar detailing. So that to me is the most striking feature that I think is visible, perhaps from the street and from the neighbor's point of view, from a backyard or even from the alley. That is material in my mind. I'm interested in what everybody else has to say.
I'd like to add that I agree. I think that stuff, parapet, mansard sides is a key kind of factor in looking at this building. I have two thoughts. One is that, you know, when I first opened this application, without remembering that we're looking at an ADU, I assumed that I was looking at the primary building when I first, you know, saw the first page, and then realized, you know, quickly that I wasn't, and kind of see immediately some of the concerns that have been brought up. I will also say that, this reminds me of a project that we had in the last few years, at least, in Baker, of another ADU that was proposed that was had quite a bit of architectural detailing and it also elicited very passionate responses from the neighbors, both in support and not. That, along the lines of what staff is recommending, we found at that meeting for that building that it was just not subordinate enough to the primary building. And so it seems like there's two key factors in looking at this building. Is one, its relationship to the primary building, but its subordination. And the difference between those being one of style, a difference in style, but also the elaborateness of this building and how it does not make it as subordinate to the primary building as I think our guidelines are asking for. That's my take on it.
I'm gonna jump in here. I actually find this application really refreshing. We have seen so many boxes as ADUs that are all identical. That I think 20 years from now, we're gonna go back and go, oh, that was a mistake. That there's not character there. I can actually read the guidelines and find where this building can be compatible. And maybe it's not exactly subordinate in some of its design detailing and features. But I think it's compatible with the district and not wholly with its primary structure, but in many components it is. And here is a detail of that stepped. And there is a Flemish type detail in the neighborhood just down the block.
Yeah, but
Not on this particular building, but all the guidelines relate to the district as well. When you read them, it says, or the surrounding historic context, or it doesn't say and. Or it does say and. Primary structure and others. But anyway, I find this refreshing. I think we have been looking at some, yes, overly neutral, dumbed down designs, and that I appreciate the thought and effort that went into this. That I would support the application and not staff's recommendation.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, this design, I think, fails on 4.6. And I'm looking at the rendering where you see in black and white the streetscape view, and then behind it the ADU. This is not an ADU. I think this is a mini-me, and would stand beautifully as a house by itself, but the guidelines are very specific that it needs to be subordinate and simplify. And instead we have a more complex and I wouldn't say insubordinate, but it doesn't, it could stand by itself, which is not subordinate. I would also say that because no one can see it from the direct view of the front, I don't see that in the guidelines where that would obviate the fact that it needs to be subordinate. So, no, subordinate if nobody can see it. Well, I don't think so. So, as I read and as I understand that we have to allow for ADUs, this one is, I would say, too nice for an ADU. Is complex and it's not subordinate. I would support staff on this one. Absolutely.
Larry, did you have?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so I guess, I mean, I sympathize with the desire of the homeowners and their architects to do something that has a level of articulation that is beyond the typical ADU. I think that there could be a solution that has this level of detail, but is just more relevant to the primary structure that I think we could all probably get behind improving, but I think it's just I think as you mentioned, Erica, the kind of compatibility, the relationship between this design and the existing house, that it just feels like details are kind of grabbed from hither and thither and not related to the primary structure, and that's what's causing the concern about subordination, not that it needs to just be like a kind of dumbed down box.
I think that I agree with what you were saying, Larry, and I definitely hear Aaron's comments and concerns about somehow kind of leading ourselves down a path of only wanting the most neutral, dumbed down boxes that there are. And I think that's why we get these kind of conflicting opinions on a project like this, where we can see the good intentions of the applicant and what they're really trying to go for, but that it perhaps misses the mark in regards to some of the nuances of the design guidelines and its relationship to the primary building. Any other thoughts, Gary?
I'm just kind of thinking about the comment that was made about eclecticism, which if eclecticism means anything goes. I mean, I don't think that's what it means, but I think that was the argument one of the applicants was trying to make, was that, and I, you know, and even eclecticism as a style does not necessarily mean good architecture. I keep thinking about this building, I think it's called Longwood, that James Marsden Fitch called the preposterous pile. I'm not saying that that is reflective of this design. It's a little jewel box, but I think it just went a little too far. I mean, I agree with what Aaron is saying, is that far too often ADUs get approved that are they meet the guidelines, but they just don't have that nuance of care that good architecture can have, even in a simple building. And I, you know, I appreciate the effort that was went here, but as I look at it, they went too far. I mean, the step parapets on either side and the corbelled brick, the bracketed cornice and so forth. I mean, just again, subtle reductions in the detail could make this an acceptable building. And it doesn't have to be a box, and they don't have to get the sloped roof. I think it just has to do with just putting a little too much frosting on it.
It looks like, I'm pretty sure this is, would be a fairly costly build. And what's the point if no one can see it? So, it's the, it can be simplified down, and the devil is in the details for sure, but not as it stands.
Any other thoughts? Sounds like we might have some conflicting opinion, but that there's might be enough to pass a motion. Would like to take a stab at that?
I'm happy to, Madam Chair, Vice Chair. I move to deny application 2023 COA 247 for the ADU at 2432 Stout Street, as per design guidelines 4.3, 4.4, 4.6, 4.8, 4.11, 4.19. Character defining features for the Curtis Park Historic District, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report.
Thank you, Nick. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Larry. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Abstentions? All right, the motion carries 6-1 with Aaron opposed. Okay, thank you. We will now move on to application 2023 COA 241 at 3256 Alcott Street in the Potter Highlands Historic District. And Crystal is our staff.
Thanks, Erica. So this application is for a front porch violation at 3256 North Alcott Street in the Potter Highlands Historic District. It was built in 1905 according to our assessor's records, and the structure is a two-story brick Queen Anne style structure with a gambrel roof. The applicant removed and replaced the previous wood front porch and stairs with a concrete and brick porch with brick waterfall stairs, which you can see here, and a new railing without landmark review or approval. The front porch violation was discovered when the applicant submitted for a small rear addition. Landmark staff informed the applicant and property owner of the violation and asked if the previous porch could be reinstalled. However, the property owner would like to keep this new front porch and proposed only to change the existing railing to a simpler railing and add a railing to the waterfall steps. So here on the left, you can see the Sanborn map showing the front porch in 1925 at the top, outlined in red, and 1929 below. The outline got messed up, so it's like right above the outline for that one. So it appears that the porch was changed between that time and widened to be almost a full width porch. However, this appears to have been completed during the period of significance for the district, which is 1873 to 1937 for this historic district. On the right here, you can see previous year photos of the porch before it was altered to its current state. These photos show the porch in July 2008 at the top left, September 2011 below that, and June 2014 at the top right, with the wood porch still intact. It appears that around May of 2017, the homeowner replaced the previous stairs with the current concrete and brick waterfall stairs, and that by 2019, the existing wood porch was completely replaced with that concrete brick porch to match the brick waterfall stairs, and that new railing was added to the porch as well. So the front porch currently only retains the existing circular columns and porch roof. So the applicant has proposed to change only the existing porch railing. I'm sure you probably couldn't see it super detailed in the first photos, but it does have some like circular details on it. So they've just proposed to simplify the porch railing to the detail you can see here at the top right. And they didn't really propose any other changes to any other elements of this porch at this time. Although staff understands the time and money that was invested into the project, the new front porch does not meet our design guidelines for front porches on contributing historic structures. Design guideline 2.37 says to preserve an original porch or stoop. The previous wood porch and stairs were removed from the house and replaced with those concrete and brick version you have here now, as well as the waterfall style stairs. The new front porch does not maintain original porch components, finishes, or details. Additionally, the new front porch does not retain the orientation or size of the previous steps. Additionally, design guideline 2.38 states, if necessary, repair or replace damaged porch elements. If there were deteriorated components or features, they were not replaced to match existing, and the overall composition was not maintained when the new porch was installed. The new brick and concrete porch is heavy and has brick pier bump outs at the column locations and does not match the simple wood porch that existed previously or the simple wood lattice work that was below the porch. Wood porch decking has also been replaced and is now that concrete and brick. Staff believes that the existing front porch should be further altered to better match the previous historic porch and that the change in railing is not sufficient to meet our design guidelines.
Thank you, Crystal. Do you have any questions for staff, commissioners? Here.
I noticed, and I'm not sure, it's in a 2019 photograph, shows a small retaining wall. Is that something that is also under consideration, or that's outside of what we're talking about right now?
It's outside it because it is something we could approve. So I've already let them know if they submitted that is something we could review and approve administratively. It's really the porch that's the issue.
Yeah, what is the driving factor behind adding the rails to the stair as part of their submission, as it's not on the porch as constructed?
Yeah, I'm not sure. That's just what they've submitted. So that would be a good question for them.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll move to the applicants.
Kiss the ocean.
Once you've been moved over to panelists and you're able to unmute collectively, if there's more than one of you, you have 10 minutes together. And if each of you could start with your name and address for the record.
Hello, my name is Robin Adams and I'm with Arc West and our address is 1525 Raleigh Street, Denver. And so, appreciating this request is out of sequence and really in response to the violation. We're welcoming some consideration and feedback for potential options or conditions that would allow for this to be approved conditionally. The original porch was in need of repair. It was actually probably beyond repair, and right or wrong, the owner decided to proceed forward with the new porch. I do say he chose quality materials, and it's going to be more durable and long lasting than the wood porches that were provided previously. And so I think there's some value to consider there, although I understand it's not in character with the original porch. In the neighborhood, it's not uncommon for many of the porches to be built out of brick, as per the examples that I submitted along with this particular application. The general size scale of the porch is the same as what was there previously, although maybe slightly different articulations with the way the brick is molded and with the waterfall stairs. The point of access and the overall footprint is the same. And as Crystal noted, the roof and the columns are the same. So, I feel like that's a positive for the work that they had done. To address your comments, we were searching for some way, because the original porch, and I don't see a picture of it here, but maybe it's in our application, the railing really wasn't consistent with any of the railings in the neighborhood. So we were trying to generate a railing detail that spoke to other railings in the neighborhood, and also basically as a safety measure provided a way to come down. And so that's really what we have to offer here. The pictures and the situation speaks for itself without a lot of long-windedness. So I'll leave it at that and see if Bernie has something he'd like to add.
Thank you. We have another party, Bernie.
Yes, good afternoon. Does everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, hello. My name is Bernard Bethes. I'm the owner of the house. My wife and I, we moved into the house back in 2014. And the main reason we purchased this house is because of its historic significance. It's something that we've kept in mind the whole way since we've purchased a house. When we first purchased the house, the porch itself was kind of falling apart. It was made out of wood, redwood, and we do have two young granddaughters, and we were concerned about our granddaughters on the porch itself, and there was no railings between the columns, so my daughters could easily fall right off of the porch. So we looked around at our houses in our neighborhood, and we noticed that there was homes with just concrete poured stairs. There was homes with cascading concrete poured stairs. There's homes with brick that wraps around the entirety of the porch. So we did our best to maintain the integrity of the house itself. We went to one of the local brick places. We brought a brick. We got as close a possible brick to the house to continue with the color and the integrity of the house. And we also had raccoons living under that porch. So to be clear, the porch was not demolished. all the boards, all the wood was taken off and it was all reinforced. It was all reinforced. All the bricks you see do not have a structural capacity to them. They're more of a wrap around the existing porch. And we would like, first of all, I would like to apologize for my ignorance. I did not think that we needed approvals to use the same exact porch and just change the facade. Now we know, and I sincerely apologize for this. And I would like to ask if we could just leave the masonry as is. I'm more than willing to replace all the railings to a more acceptable plain railing, and I'm willing to put railings onto the stairs themselves, which probably should be code by now to have some sort of a railing for safety issues on the stairs. That is all I have. I really would appreciate any possible consideration that would allow us to move forward with some changes to what we have. But the masonry itself is something that's very tough to take apart and put back together in a much less pleasing manner and less sound manner than what was there previously. My wife would also like to chime in here. Her name's Carol.
My name is Carol Bethes. We bought the house in 2014. Before we moved to the house, I have looked too many neighborhoods around Colorado. We were new to Colorado. We love the history of Colorado. We love the place and everything. When we saw the house, we immediately fell in love. Our idea to buy the house is to be our forever house, since we became empty nesters and have our grandchildren visit them and all. All we would like to do is try to do whatever Landmark wants and to be in good terms and to live continually in our beautiful neighborhood and encourage other people who live in this neighborhood to do the same. Unfortunately, when we moved in and we bought the house, we really didn't know anything about it. We just knew that it was an older house and it was a historic house, and that was it. When we did these changes, we just didn't know. We just wanted to go with the neighborhood, whatever it was around, and that was it. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicants? Nick, did you want to follow up?
Oh, sure. What was the addition of the railing on the stairs? The impetus for that, given what your statement was, is your perception of the code, or is it something aesthetic that you think is more in keeping with the guidelines?
No, there were no railings between the three columns initially, which in our opinion was a danger to our young granddaughters at the time. And the whole time we were just waiting to possibly add the handrails to the stairs themselves afterwards. But at this point, I believe the embellishments of the metal stiles on the railings aren't up to a Dutch colonial house's standards. And that's why I am willing to change it, because there's also an LED cap in the middle, and I'm willing to remove all of that and install something that would be more agreeable to the Landmark Association.
Right.
And if I may add, I think our porch is above 30 inches, so technically it should have a railing, at least around the top. So previously, and a lot of the old historic porches don't have railings, and they're not wired to as their current state until they're repaired. But that was one of the considerations, as well as just trying to change the railing to a more style that represented the neighborhood.
Yeah, my question was more specific to the railings on the stairs that aren't there today.
Oh, okay. Oh, correct. Yeah, those were added as a potential architectural element. It could be, I think you still have to have them at least for the first top 2 steps, given the height of them, or at least a single one down the side.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Do we have any public comments on this project? Doesn't look like we do. So, staff, would you like to provide a recap?
Yeah, I just want to mention that staff did go out with one of our inspectors to discuss the issue with the applicants. We realized it's a lot. We did suggest potentially just changing the stairs to better look like the stairs that were previous, or maybe adding a lattice work, or potentially like staining the grout to better match the house, because I feel like the brick that's there currently just really doesn't really match. So we discussed a lot of options or things they could potentially do. They obviously didn't choose to do any of those things. So I'm really looking to the commission to tell them what they think they need to, if they need to put it all the way back, or maybe there's some middle ground where you might be satisfied.
Great, thank you. All right, we'll move into deliberation. Would anyone like to start?
Question, how did the architect allow it to go without a permit?
I don't know if an architect was involved at the time they did that. Yeah. Sounds like they have an architect now to help them.
Well, I guess if I can jump in, I think maybe the surprise thing that came out of the applicants talking about this is that actually the original porch structure sounds like it's intact, and that this is just like a thin veneer of brick that isn't actually terribly challenging to remove. I was under the impression that they had rebuilt the whole porch in concrete, and that it was going to be like a major reconstruction effort. So yeah, it doesn't seem like it's particularly onerous to ask that just be reverted to its historic state.
In fact, if this brick encloses the original porch, there's a likelihood that the wood structure is in jeopardy because it can't, brick isn't waterproof. Water will get through the brick. And wood that's not able to be dried out, like a wooden porch will deteriorate rapidly. So I think there's some bigger problems here if it's allowed to stand as it is. In addition to that, the stairs don't comply with code because there's 3 different riser heights. The bottom riser is taller than the middle 3, and then the top riser is shorter than the middle 3. Which is a safety problem without handrails. So I think there's a number of issues with this porch that need to be addressed, even if it wasn't in violation of the guidelines. And so I agree with staff's recommendation to deny this and see if what's a fuller investigation of what's going on here, how these alterations were actually constructed, and how it might actually jeopardize the structure, and then have the applicant and the applicant's architect actually come up with a solution that meets the guidelines.
Yeah, I agree, Gary. I always like to look at the violations as, would we approve this if it came to us as a design? Would we approve, the full removal of the wooden porch or a brick veneer or waterfall stairs on this particular building and that rail design? And I think it would be denied based upon if this was a design presented to us.
I have to throw a rose here. When you look at the before and after of the landscaping around the house, did a really nice job in making it, you know, with removing the chain link fence and the landscape is fresher and really accents the house. It's too bad that they miscued on the stairs and the porch, but as staff has said, they have options. And I think a denial gives them the most freedom to come back with either the lattice work underneath it or wooden stairs that are appropriately proportioned and all of that. I don't think it should be a huge undertaking, really. Bring it in.
Yeah, I think I'd just like to add, I agree with what's been said, and I think maybe Gary was getting at this a little bit as far as confirming how the porch as it is now is constructed. I could see some possibilities for middle ground if there were the case to be made for kind of too onerous to remove some things, but I do think the applicant needs to kind of reconsider what their priorities are, but I think the stairs and the railings that they're suggesting for the stairs themselves kind of highlight the problem of the stairs. In that not only do they need these railings, but also that, you know, the angling, the waterfall design is just not appropriate for this historic house, and the railings just really emphasize that lack of.
It does, I think even if you look at the top brick on the steps, it's rounded, which
Yes.
is not something we would typically approve of
Right.
this type of structure either.
Right. So it seems like a denial is kind of what we're all aiming for, in the hopes that that gives the applicant an ability to kind of rethink what they'd like to bring to us and show either, you know, whether it's a middle ground that might maybe some of what Crystal has suggested to them before. I would just posit that out. If people who disagree, please speak up, but or you know, have them kind of outline truly what is the construction method that's been used, because I'm a little not sure.
Gary,
If I-
did he say that the behind the brick veneer, that's not a ginormous concrete block, that's framing or something?
Well, I'm relying on what the applicant said they did.
Mhm.
And what I heard said was that the existing or the original structure of the porch is still there underneath and behind the brick that's there.
Okay,
It's just kind of hard to know what that really means.
Yes.
So
That's
that's
right, but
why-
if that is a true characterization of what they did, I think there's some
there's something.
potential problems.
Yeah.
In terms of durability of
Mhm.
wood structure.
I was thinking of removing this.
I've looked
massive
on buildings
concrete.
where wood porches were improved by adding quarry tile and whatnot. And the net result was it just it caused rapid deterioration of the wood structure underneath. Because masonry is not one.
Does the city itself have the same concern that we do, sort of after the fact, that this wasn't permitted?
Yes, this would require permit, so therefore it's in violation.
So are they pursuing a remedy?
I mean, the first step in that is review and approval by the Landmark Preservation Commission, and then they can do for permitting review.
Because I think that's when all that, the building science would be uncovered, right?
Well,
And what's the
Should be.
foundation?
Mhm.
Well, that's the mechanism we have.
So I think we're in agreement. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I can make a motion.
Thank you, Anna.
Madam Chair, I move to deny application number 2023 COA 241 for the front porch alteration at 3256 North Alcott Street as per design guidelines 2.37, 2.38, character defining features for the Potter Highlands Historic District presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
George? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? I'm a little late too. Any opposed or abstentions? Then the motion carries. Thank you. We will move on to our last design review project. This is number 2023 COA 243 at 3020 Perry Street in Wolf Place Historic District. And Jesse is our staff.
Sorry about that. Had to get my camera on. Okay, so this is 3020 Perry Street, constructed in 1927, and it's a contributing building to the Wolf Place Historic District. The applicant is proposing to demolish the existing non-historic garage and construct a new ADU structure at the back of the lot. Next slide. The ADU will be 24 feet by 18 feet and will be 23 feet 2.5 inches in height. Next slide. The ADU form will have a 2-story Dutch hip gable roof form and a 1-story shed roof bump out on the north. Next slide. The ADU will be a full 2 stories in height, but will be lower on the lot due to the slope of the lot and will not exceed the height of the primary structure. Next slide. The roof will be clad in asphalt shingles in the color estate gray. The roof will have a flush mounted skylights on the south roof plane. And then the ADU will be clad in smooth finish fiber cement lap siding with a 6-inch reveal. The ADU trim will be, and banding details will also be a smooth finish fiber cement material. And then finally here, the ADU windows will be double hung encasement aluminum clad wood windows and set into the wall 2 inches. The service doors will be half light and solid panel steel doors. And the garage overhead door will be a solid panel steel door reused from the non-historic garage. The ADU will be accessed by a steel exterior stair on the south elevation. And the lighting on the building will be simple gooseneck downlights and a lantern style sconce at the entrance, at the main entrance. Staff do have concerns over the squat window proportions on window type C. We are recommending conditional approval of this application with the condition that window form C's proportions be altered so that they are more compatible with the surrounding historic context, citing guideline 4.8.
Thank you, Jesse. Do we have any questions for staff?
I have a question.
Yes,
Jesse,
ma'am.
and it's about the height of the ADU relative to the house.
Yes, ma'am.
So I know how that sounds slow.
Yes.
But relatively, are the peaks of the two structures at the same point? Because I think you read out that the ADU is 23.5 inches high. And the application shows the house is 18.10. So it's sort of, but I don't know if it's at the same point. And it was really, the drawings were hard to see them together.
Right. It doesn't appear like it will exceed the height of the existing structure because it is on the downslope. But I cannot answer if it will be at the same height as the primary roof or the primary structure's roof. That would be a good question for the applicant. But looking at their site elevations where you can see the ADU in relationship to that primary structure, it doesn't look like it will exceed that at all.
Exactly. Okay, thank you. I kept doing the math and I could still couldn't figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, we will hear from the applicants now. Once you are allowed to speak, you can unmute and you have 10 minutes altogether to make your presentation, and if you would begin with your name and address for the record, please.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. My name is Will Hart. I am the co-owner of 3020 Perry Street with my wife, Eleanor Hart, and I am the applicant for this ADU proposal. I will just speak for a couple minutes, then hand it over to our architect, Steve, to talk about more of the design details. We've been in the neighborhood for about 3 years. We love this neighborhood. We love our neighbors. We live dangerously close to Blue Pan Pizza, and we wouldn't really want to move any further away. When we moved into this house, it was just the two of us. Our family has doubled in size since then. And it was pretty amazing how quickly we felt like we were desiring some more space, especially given some work from home conditions after COVID. We explored a few different options for how to create more space on the property. It became apparent to us pretty quickly that rather than disturbing the 1927 main house, that it would be more practical to change the garage in the back of the property. So we're proposing the ADU on top of the garage. While we had hoped to reuse the existing garage foundation, I think the garage was built circa 2008, that might not be exact. But the existing garage's foundation could support a second story. Unfortunately, it does encroach on new setbacks. So I believe it was built on 3-foot setbacks. And so that encroaches on the latest zoning that has 5-foot setbacks. So what that meant for us is that we would need to demolish the existing garage and foundation to build this new structure and shift it in 2 feet on the east and north side, which we're planning to do. And so that's what we're planning to move forward with. So we were really looking to balance sort of creating enough space to have a livable space above the garage, staying within the bulk plane, which is why we have that bump out on the side elevation, and also preserving as much of the backyard space as possible while keeping the design subordinate to the main house. So with that, I'll hand it over to Steve unless there are any questions from the commission.
I think we'll hold our questions until after the until Steve has spoken.
Great.
Thank you. Steve, if you could start with your name and address as well. You have about 7.5 minutes left of your time.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, my name is Steven Saranowitz. I live at 4027 Clay Street in Denver. I'm the architect on this project. So yeah, going off of what Will said, you know, with the new design, we definitely are, you know, meeting the setbacks on the north and east sides. That's kind of what created the bump out with the shed roof. But really overall, we just tried to match the shape of the existing house with the clipped gable end style. To answer the question earlier, the ridge height of the ADU is 11 inches lower than the ridge height of the primary house. So from this schematic, it's actually 11 inches lower than the primary house. I think basically we just, like Will said, we wanted to maximize the yard on the south side. And so that's why we kind of pushed everything to the north and got everything to fit below the bulk plane imaginary lines there. And I think the biggest thing with the window C is that, you know, there was intent why we came up with that shape. If we were to mimic or use the same window size as size B that's on the upper level next to the entry door, that would stretch the windows 12 inches lower, putting them closer to the top of foundational in the garage, putting them closer to the grade outside. So it was really just a matter of like a safety thing. Yeah, we could make them tempered, but it was more just a concern of, let's try to raise those up away from the ground a little bit. So if the kids are playing in the backyard, the balls or something wouldn't hit the window because it's, a foot lower. So that's what drove the height of those windows. We use the same window above the kitchen sink. And that's, there's really not much we can do there because we need, header height between the ceiling and the window, and splash guard height from the seal to the countertop. So we tried to simplify our windows to just these two types, window B, and then these more square shaped window C's. But that was our intent for coming up with the shape for window C. But I think that's it. Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicants? I don't think we do. No. All right, thank you for your time. We will move on to public comment if there are any. Okay. All right, staff, any summary recap?
I did want to follow up. So just to be clear, staff isn't saying that they can't have a shorter window there. We're just asking that the proportions be more contextual. So they can shrink the size of the window, still meet their height requirements that they're trying to get, but also still be contextual to the proportions that are found in this.
Okay, thank you.
And so is your interpretation of that just more rectangular, less square?
Yeah, less square, less squat, because that's not really typically found. They're more tall, narrow proportions found in this district.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, what did everyone think?
This is an ADU.
So you approve?
Yeah,
the-
this is more typical of what you would look for in an accessory unit. I appreciate the applicant's concern regarding safety of the windows, but that can be alterable. Keeping the window off a little further off the ground would certainly, if I had small kids running around, be concerned about that too. So bravo on him for doing that. And yeah, they can work it around. I'll support staff on this one perfectly.
Okay. Anyone else?
I'm not sure about the proportion, changing the proportionality of those windows, because then it seems to me they would be very small little rectangles. If we're to keep them off the ground still and above the height of the sink, they're just going to shrink so much.
I guess on that front,
I mean,
thought,
Yeah, because I'm not seeing that.
yeah,
Very
just, and not to, drive the design, but as a friendly comment to the designers that, yeah, if you wanted to maintain some width, say at the kitchen, for example, you just do kind of a double gang, tall, narrow window that has precedent in the house actually, to get that kind of width, so, yeah.
So pair of windows with a mullion.
Exactly.
So you would support staff's condition in that there's multiple ways to approach that.
Correct.
Anyone else? I will say I appreciate the roof form matching the primary roof form. I think that works well. And I would also support staff's recommendations. Great.
Agreed.
Anyone like to make a motion?
Motion, Madam Chair, I move to conditionally approve application 2023-COA-243 for the ADU at 3020 Perry Street as per design guideline 4.8. We have more design guidelines in here. I'll just go through them. Looks like we have design guidelines 4.1, 4.9, 4.18, 4.3, 4.4. 4.11, 4.5 through 4.8, 4.19. 4.20. Presented testimony, submitted documentation and information provided in the staff report with the following condition that window form C's proportions be altered so they are more compatible with the surrounding context.
Thank you, Larry. We have a second.
Second.
Thank you, Gary. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Great, the motion carries. Thank you. I believe we do not have any business items or discussion items, so I will close the meeting now at 4:48.
I was just gonna say, on the guidelines, the only reason why I put just the one guideline is that was one that's tied to the conditions. I think it's fine.
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah.
I'm just
It doesn't
overthinking
say
it.